Wu Yuan left the Li clan's manor on Fortune Street with one of his trusted scholarly secretaries. As he was walking along the street in his official attire, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, then balanced himself on one foot as he removed one of his boots to pour out the sand inside. The scholarly secretary was already accustomed to seeing this. However, Fortune Street was far more lively and bustling than it had been in the past, so the young scholarly secretary felt the need to conceal Wu Yuan as much as possible so that he didn't make a fool out of himself in front of the surrounding bystanders. At the same time, he said in a quiet voice, Li Hong had already told us that he was willing to set an example by making a compromise when it comes to the matter regarding the immortal tomb, so why has he suddenly changed his mind? Is he not concerned that he'll tarnish his image and be regarded as a fickle and unreliable man in your eyes? There was a weary look on Wu Yuan's face as he sighed. I'm assuming it's because Li Hong's second son, Li Baozhen, has managed to make a name for himself in the capital. Perhaps he's already found a powerful backer and sent a letter back to inform his clansmen of this, telling Li Hong not to make any rash decisions or something like that. Alternatively, it could be that reclusive eldest son of Li Hong's who advised him that it's best to stay put and observe for now. It's hard to say what led to this decision. In any case, we're the ones who have to suffer the consequences. All of our original arrangements were made on the basis that my teacher would. Let's not talk about this anymore. Where there's a will, there's a way. Let's go and have a couple of flagons of spring peach blossom wine. I'll treat you, but I don't have any money on me, so you'll have to pay this time. I'll pay you back later. The scholarly secretary was already accustomed to this type of shameless gesture from Wu Yuan, and a curious look appeared on his face as he remarked, There's a story circulating around the town, stating that a fortune teller had once foretold that the two sons and the daughter of the Li clan on Fortune Street were destined for great things. Isn't that right? Wu Yuan rubbed his own thin and pale face as he smiled and replied, You believe in stuff like that? Everyone who wants to make a name for themselves in the capital city of our great Li Empire has some insight when it comes to establishing connections and forging reputations, particularly those who come from humble upbringings. Even so-called wealthy and powerful clans aren't guaranteed to do well. Your Fu clan has always been renowned for its tremendous wealth. Outsiders may be unaware of whether that reputation is deserved or not, but I'm sure you're well aware of the truth. Isn't that right, Fuyu? Fuyu was quite disgruntled to hear this and he protested. Why are you bringing up my clan all of a sudden? Wu Yuan's mood was buoyed by Fuyu's indignant display, and he burst into laughter as he patted Fuyu on the shoulder as he said, We're both in the same boat, each of us is just as unsightly as the other. Fuyu also burst into laughter upon hearing this. Isn't it much better to say that we share the same ambitions and outlook on life? That's rather pretentious, is it not? Wu Yuan chuckled. It's really tiring having to keep up the facade of a gentleman. Instead, it's much easier to embrace being a scoundrel. You've really let yourself go, haven't you? Fuyu sighed with a wistful shake of his head. Wu Yuan also heaved a forlorn sigh, then changed the subject as he mused. I miss my wife. Fuyu smiled as he said, Isn't it about time that we lifted the restrictions on brothels in our Dragon Spring County? Fine wine is decent on its own, but its flavor is ultimately lacking with no beautiful women in accompaniment. Wu Yuan nodded in response as he replied with a serious expression. There are some women among the prisoners of the Lu Empire that would be perfect for the job. As opposed to forcing them to work themselves to death in the forests and mountains, we may as well give them another choice. Of course, we can't force them into this, so the decision will ultimately be up to them. Fuyu, from now on, you don't have to accompany me on these trips and be shunned by the town's residents anymore. Instead, I'm going to put you in charge of overseeing this matter. Fuyu was very much taken aback to hear this. He had only brought up this subject as a joke, and a perplexed look appeared on his face as he asked, Are you being serious right now? Wu Yuan adjusted his collar slightly, then smiled as he replied, Why would you think I'm not being serious about this? With all those mountains being developed, the majority of their future residents are going to be immortals. How are we going to keep those esteemed immortals around and convince them to spend money in our town? Are you going to be able to do that? Or do you think I'm up to the task? I'm just an insignificant little governor who's about to be stripped of his title of kiln supervision official. I've heard from my teacher that those immortals are generally not attracted to mortal women for their looks alone because female cultivators possess far superior physical bodies to mortal women. Hence, the only thing about mortal women that could present some measure of allure to immortals would be their status. For example, the princess of a fallen empire or the young mistress of a powerful clan that had fallen from grace would be like rare delicacies in the eyes of immortals, and those prisoners of the Lu Empire are not lacking in this area. An indignant look appeared on Fu Yu's face as he grumbled. Why has the imperial court decided to assign a new kiln supervision official at a time like this? It's clear that you're being screwed over. During the past 2 months, you've explored every single one of the 60 or so mountains on foot, and spent countless time and effort negotiating with those sly old foxes. From the construction of the county office and the city god pavilion to the site selection of the Wunchong pavilion and the martial sage temple, from the preparation of the construction materials to the placement of those prisoners from the Lu Empire, you've overseen every single task on your own, no matter how trivial, and there hasn't been a single day when you've gotten over 6 hours of sleep. Yet now, those old farts in the imperial court are condemning you for failing in your duties? Perhaps someone from the imperial court has been manipulating the 4 surnames and 10 clans all along, instructing them to pose obstacles for you at every turn. I bet they're trying to ensure that your political career never makes it out of Dragon Spring County. Following his indignant tirade, Fu Yu seemed to have realized that this was a rather unrealistic conspiracy theory, and he grumbled, "At the very least, they're trying to ensure that you won't be in charge of any of the ministries before you turn 50. All you'll be able to do is slowly progress up the ranks without receiving just reward for your efforts." Wu Yuan opened his mouth as if to say something, but remained silent in the end. All of a sudden, Fu Yu burst into laughter, and Wu Yuan turned to him as he asked, "What's gotten you so happy all of a sudden?" Fu Yu replied, "Dragon Spring County is a small place, but compared with the luxurious capital, I much prefer living here. There's fine wine, pastries, and meat buns every morning. If I want to eat anything, I can just come here on foot to purchase it, and the return trip would only take me an hour at most. Sometimes, when I'm in a bad mood, I would go to the wine shop and order half a liter of wine, then sit on my own in peace and quiet for an hour or two without anyone approaching me or calling out to me. If I'm in the mood for it, I can order a small bowl of braised meat and a dish of pickled vegetables to help the wine go down. I really want to keep spending my days like this, and that gives me even more incentive to do well here, even if there are many hardships ahead." Wu Yuan nodded in response. "If all we did was laze around and rely on others to carry us up the ranks, then what's the point in serving as officials? We have to put our foot down and actually do something to benefit the people. I have to say that you're better than me in this regard. I came from an impoverished background, so I know how difficult things are for the general public. In contrast, you're a young master of the esteemed Fu clan, so it's quite surprising to me that you can think this way." The two of them walked along beside one another, and Fu Yu sighed. "Therein lies the problem. You can do things for the sake of the people, but the people won't necessarily be grateful to you. In the history books, there is certainly no lack of examples of capable officials diligently working for the sake of the people, only to be denounced and stripped of their official titles in disgrace. Over the past few centuries, there have been some cases of such officials being posthumously lauded for their deeds, but those examples are far and few in between, and what does it matter anyway when they're already dead?" "That's not the right way to think about it," Wu Yuan disagreed with a shake of his head. "If you set out to do something, then that should be your focus. Your purpose should be to accomplish something that you can feel proud of. As for whether the people will be grateful to you and whether the imperial court will approve of your deeds, that's not for you to think about now. Overthinking such matters will only result in disillusionment, and you could easily find yourself losing your will and drive before you've even done anything. As Confucians, we are not like Taoists and Buddhists, who are always seeking out the limits of the teachings that they believe in." Fu Yu heaved a faint sigh upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Wu Yuan continued, almost as if he were speaking to himself, "Among the 3 teachings, Taoism has a focus on peace and tranquility. It is a teaching that revolves solely around oneself. Even if the heavens fall and the earth shatters, as long as one attains immortality for oneself, that is enough. They do not place any importance on past and future lives, instead focusing on the life that they are presently living, because they need their current body to complete the journey to immortality. In contrast, Buddhism is split up into Mahayana Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is similar to Taoism, while Mahayana Buddhism tells its believers that all pain and suffering in this life will lead to blessings in the next life, thereby instilling within its believers immense hope for the future. As for Confucianism, it is the most closely intertwined with the secular world out of the three teachings. Furthermore, it raises a predicament where the more well-learned and advanced one's cultivation base is, the more cautious and restricted they become, as they always feel like their words and actions could break certain rules or encroach upon certain boundaries. For example, my teacher's doctrine is that practical ability should be valued above theoretical knowledge, and his objective is to weed out the Confucians who have nothing but empty knowledge. Unfortunately, all those who propose radical new ideas are bound to be ostracized and make many enemies. Wu Yuan shook his head as he continued, "My teacher had the right idea, but anything will inevitably go sour when taken to the extreme. Furthermore, there is a sense of inertia present in everyone. There's a very good chance that during extended periods of peace, say 500 or even 1,000 years, scholars will still be reading the same books that contain the teachings of sagely figures, but they'd be doing so in a conceited and sanctimonious manner, rather than actually trying to better themselves. At the moment, this is not a problem. The three eternal pursuits of Confucianism are to establish a strong moral compass, make contributions to society and empire, and ensure that one's words and writings are worthy of being passed down to future generations. At the moment, Confucians are still striving for the three pursuits in equal measure, but if my teacher's doctrine were to be implemented, then the emphasis would gradually be skewed solely to the contributions one can make to society and empire. If such a mindset were to set in, then scholars would renounce the establishment of a strong moral compass and the pursuit of theoretical knowledge. That would truly be a terrifying world to live in." Fuyu was stunned to hear this, and an alarmed look appeared on his face as he grabbed firmly onto Wu Yuan's arm, then said in an urgent voice, "Wu Yuan, you absolutely cannot say this to your teacher no matter what. You're not a cultivator, so you don't know how cruel and brutal the pursuit of the great Tao can be. Any careless words or actions could lead to your demise." Wu Yuan patted the back of Fuyu's hand as he replied with a wry smile, "Of course I don't have the courage to say this to my teacher. Furthermore, given my teacher's immense intelligence and wealth of knowledge, perhaps I have simply failed to comprehend the full breadth and nuance of his doctrine. I'm sure my teacher would scoff at my ideas." Fuyu released Wu Yuan's arm, then cautioned once again, "Make sure you don't ever let these ideas slip out. I don't want to see you follow in Song Yuzhang's footsteps," and Fuyu's voice trailed off there as he knew that it would be unwise to speak excessively on these topics. Wu Yuan changed the subject as he said, "Fuyu, if I ever stray down the wrong path, you have to remember to rebuke me and denounce me to my face, no matter how lofty my status is at that time. You have to make me see reason and guide me back to the right path. Rest assured, if that time comes and my words can't get through to you, then you can expect a punch from me, Minister Wu. A minister of one of the 6 ministries is only a second-rank official. That's too paltry a post for me to settle for. Not at all. Think about it, once our greatly empire takes over the entire Eastern Treasured Vile continent, would you still think the minister of one of the 6 ministries is too paltry a position? In my opinion, that's already a very lofty goal to aim for. Let me make this clear right now. All I'm good at is coming up with some ideas here and there, and I'm not a very adaptable person, so I'm going to follow you until the day that I die. If you become a minister in the future, how about you make me your right-hand minister?" The pair of scholars continued to jokingly discuss this subject as they returned to the county office. Inside the Yuan clan's manor, an azure-robed scholar picked up his book as he smiled and murmured to himself, "Wu Yuan, your thought process is correct when it comes to the excessive emphasis on practical contributions that could result from my doctrine, but it's also true that you have indeed failed to comprehend the full depth of my doctrine." At the stroke of dawn, a horse-drawn carriage drew to a halt outside the Yuan clan's manor. Yu Lu and Xie Xie were waiting beside the horse-drawn carriage with their luggage on their backs, and Cui Chan was making his way out of the manor while yawning lazily. He was wearing an ivory-colored robe of exceptional material and tailorship, and trailing along behind him was the young boy, who had a dejected and reluctant look on his face. "Where are we going, young master?" Yu Lu couldn't help but ask. "I'm taking you to seek out an education in Great Sui Nation. The two of you were meant to be students of Mountain Cliff Academy to begin with." Cui Chan replied in a lazy voice. Yu Lu and Xie exchanged a bemused glance upon hearing this. The coach driver was one of the spies of the Great Li Empire, and he was seated in a completely still manner at the front of the carriage. Cui Chan bent down to lift up the curtain covering the entrance of the carriage, then suddenly turned and instructed, "Get Wang Yifu to come and replace you as coach driver. You stay in Dragon Spring County and continue to keep an eye on Dragon Riding Alley and Apricot Blossom Alley." The spy nodded in response, then got down from the carriage and departed in silence. Around 15 minutes later, Wang Yifu arrived to replace the coach driver. Yu Lu was looking directly ahead with a composed expression, while a cold look surfaced in Xie's eyes, and she didn't seem to have been very fond of Wang Yifu. Wang Yifu was the man who had been tasked with killing Song Yuzhang. He had once been a general of the Lu Empire, but he hadn't been reduced to a prisoner of the Great Li Empire, nor had he been integrated into the Great Li Empire's military. Instead, he had become a personal lapdog to Song Jisun's mother, and now that she had been banished to the Palace of Eternal Spring, Wang Yifu's master had changed from her to Cui Chan. Due to the fact that they were traveling along the official road, the horse-drawn carriage they were taking was quite a large and spacious one that was enough to fit the three of them. However, Cui Chan instructed Yu Lu and Xie to sit outside, while he occupied the spacious carriage on his own. It didn't take long before the sound of reading rang out from within the carriage. Cui Chan was the esteemed imperial preceptor of the Great Li Empire and arguably the best Go player on the entire continent, yet he was having to recite passages from these children's books every day, and it was quite an amusing sight to behold. The horse-drawn carriage traveled out of the town through the eastern gate, and Cui Chan lifted the curtain to take a look at the newly constructed county office near the eastern gate. At the moment, only the foundation of the county office had taken shape, and under the supervision of the county officials, the manual laborers sourced from the town were busy at work, raising clouds of dust across the entire eastern gate. Cui Chan lowered the curtain with a dark expression. After leaving the town, the horse-drawn carriage traveled along the official road for roughly 2 hours before Cui Chan instructed Wang Yifu to stop the carriage. Cui Chan then emerged from the carriage before making his way to a small hill on his own, where Cui Minghuang of Lakeview Academy had already been waiting for him for quite some time. As soon as he spotted Cui Chan, Cui Minghuang immediately extended a respectful bow. Cui Chan stood on the hilltop as he looked back at the town. Unfortunately, given how drastically his cultivation base had fallen, he no longer had the eyesight to be able to see the town clearly. It'll take some time for Cloud Drape Mountain to be instated as the northern mountain of our Great Li Empire, so that's most likely not going to be happening anytime soon. However, construction of the new academy on Cloud Drape Mountain must continue, and it'll be completed in half a year at the very least. Rest assured, you've taken a huge risk here and almost lost your life, so I definitely won't renege on my promise to you. Once the academy is constructed, you will be instated as the Deputy Mountain Master. After that, the Great Li Empire will be sure to do everything in its power to support this new academy, so that it will be more worthy than Mountain Cliff Academy of becoming one of the 72 academies of Confucianism. Cui Minghuang was quite relieved to hear this, and he vowed with a determined expression, "I won't disappoint you, esteemed patriarch." Cui Chan paid no heed to Cui Minghuang's promise as he continued, "I'm going to leave that porcelain boy to you. Once the new academy is constructed, get him to study there. Barring any mishaps, his cultivation should progress very smoothly. In fact, he may even reach the middle 5 tiers at a startlingly fast speed, so you have to be mentally prepared. I advise you to hide him so that he isn't exposed to the outside world too early." I meticulously selected those pieces of broken porcelain from the mountain porcelain, and it took me a great deal of time and effort to assemble those porcelain pieces into a porcelain person that possesses a soul. He was nothing more than a pile of scrap porcelain, yet he's now virtually indistinguishable from a living person, and his creation is the culmination of my life's work, coupled with a healthy dose of luck, so you have to look after him. I don't mean to make things sound more dire than they are, but essentially, I'm entrusting him fully to you now as I'm no longer able to look after him myself. Cui Minghuang was overcome by emotion as he cupped his fist and extended a deep bow. "Rest assured, patriarch, I'll be sure to treat him as if he were my own flesh and blood." Cui Chan was looking a little weary as he said, "Aside from Song Chongjing, you can do with the 2 groups of spies in the town as you see fit. I've already spoken to them in advance, so they'll be willing to follow your orders. Also, whenever you have some free time, go and chat with old man Yang from the Yang family's medicine shop. That old fart is extremely fair in everything he does, and he never puts any weight on concepts like good and evil, or enemies and allies. Try and convince him to agree to make deals with you. As for Wanqiong, I advise you to stay away from him. At this point, the 4 surnames and 10 clans on 4 families and 10 clans in Peachleaf Alley are all broken up, and they're no longer as tight-knit and unified as they once were. Make sure to keep an eye out for the Li clan, the one that Li Shixing belongs to. As for the Li clan's arrogant second young master, Li Baozhen, now that his backer has fallen, he won't be knocked back down to square one, but this will teach him a lesson on how volatile and unpredictable things can be in the capital city. You can choose either one of the 2 brothers, but you can only choose one. As for Wu Yuan, you can interact with him as you see fit, but stick strictly to official matters and don't get too close to him. Even though Cui Chan was a handsome young boy, Cui Minghuang was struck by the illusion that he was standing before a weary and jaded old man who had lived 10 lifetimes. A careful look appeared on Cui Minghuang's face as he asked, "Could it be that Wu Yuan is?" Cui Chan was slouched over slightly as he made his way down the hill, and he nodded as he replied in a weary voice, "He serves Her Majesty." She's always had a tendency to select people like him who come from humble upbringings, but are intelligent, and have lofty aspirations and exceptional forbearance. At the same time, all of them have their own fatal flaws, which make them easy for her to control. An enlightened look appeared on Cui Minghuang's face upon hearing this. "I see. No wonder I felt like something wasn't quite right on that occasion when you were speaking to me back at the Yuan clan's ancestral residence. It was only after the event that I realized that it had to have been because Wu Yuan was present." Cui Chan heaved a faint sigh, and instead of concealing the truth, he revealed, "Back at the Yuan clan's ancestral residence, I gave him a chance. In the past, he had leaked all manners of trivial information to Her Majesty, but I turned a blind eye to all of that. However, if he had chosen to leak that secret to her after leaving the manor, then he would have sealed his own fate. If a disciple dares to betray their master, then the master is perfectly justified to kill the student." Cui Minghuang offered no response to this. Cui Chan patted him on the shoulder as he mused, "I have very high hopes for you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have told you all of this. I'm both honored and terrified." Cui Minghuang replied with a wry smile, "You can stop here. There's no need to accompany me any further." Cui Chan sped up as he made his way down the hill, and after taking around a dozen steps, he turned around with a smile as he said, "You're a smart guy, so I'm sure you're thinking that given how I set that trap for Wu Yuan, I must have set a trap for you as well. Truth be told, you're not wrong. That is indeed the case. But as for where the trap is and when you'll need to make a choice that decides whether you live or die, that's something that you'll have to ponder for yourself." Cui Minghuang was horrified to hear this, nor did he display any indignation. Instead, his eyes were full of resolve and anticipation as he replied, "I've already read all the books I need to read, so this will be where the joy in my life lies from here onward." Cui Minghuang turned and cast his gaze toward the horse-drawn carriage at the foot of the mountain, tucking his hands into his sleeves as he mused, "Sure enough, you really do need all 3 types of disciples. In Cui Minghuang, Wu Yuan, and the porcelain boy, I've completed the set. From now on, the 4 of us will go our separate ways and see what fate has in store for us." As he was walking along, Cui Chan suddenly shuddered as he murmured to himself, "Given Chan Pingan's personality, if he ever finds out the truth someday, he'll definitely beat me to death without a second thought." A hint of sorrow and anxiety appeared on his face as he continued, "What's most damning of all is that a master is completely justified to kill their disciple. No, I can't allow myself to meet such a terrible fate. I have to think of a way to get myself out of this pickle." All of a sudden, a smile appeared on Cui Chan's face, and he began to swagger down the hill in a carefree manner as he chortled to himself, "I can just pin the blame entirely on the Greatly Empire's imperial preceptor. I'm Cui Dongshan, not Cui Chan." The body that he was currently using was one that he regarded as an extremely precious treasure. It was innately pure and untainted, but the original host of the body had been born with a mental disability, and he passed away before even reaching 6 years of age. Over the course of many years, Cui Chan had refined the body using a secret technique to transform it into a vessel that could be easily possessed on a temporary basis, much like an inn that one could stay in. Zhuhou's small world was extremely important to him as it concerned his Dao attainment catalyst, so he had to enter the small world in person, and that was why he had brought out this vessel and possessed it with a part of his soul. As a result, there were two Cui Chans in this world, one old and one young. The old Cui Chan remained in the capital city of the Great Li Empire to continue serving as the imperial preceptor, overseeing matters from afar, while the young Cui Chan entered the town and resided in the Yuan clan's ancestral residence in case any unforeseen mishaps were to occur. Of course, deep down, Cui Chan also had a secondary objective, which was to witness Qi Jingchuan's demise with his own two eyes. For once in his life, he wanted to beat Qi Jingchun fair and square. However, what Cui Chan had completely failed to anticipate was that he would lose to Qi Jingchun in catastrophic fashion, and that was only the beginning of his suffering. Following Qi Jingchuan's passing, he was sought out by the old geezer that was supposed to have already perished in the Forest of Virtue, who casually severed his connection between him and his original body and imposed a punishment on him, forcing him to read those same few books every single day. What was even more ridiculous was that none of those books were ones that had been written by the old man. To make matters even worse, he had made an utterly absurd decision, condemning Cui Chan to serve as Chan Pingin's student. What could I possibly learn from Chan Pingin? Pottery firing or charcoal making? As for exactly what that old geezer was thinking, that was something that literally only the heavens knew. The old man had never attained any lofty scholarly titles in the secular world, but he was once ranked as high as fourth in the Confucian temple. At that time he had truly been at the height of his powers. People were scrambling to carry his deity statue into the temple in reverence, and even the old man himself couldn't stop them. However, Cui Chan had always felt like the old man was quite happy with what was happening at the time, and he never made a serious effort to intervene on a mandatory path on the way to the Great Li Empire's southern border. A horse-drawn carriage was parked on the side of the road, and Cui Chan was seated on the roof of the carriage, looking northward with an expectant expression. Wang Yifu was seated in the driver's position, and as usual, he was completely silent. Yulu was organizing his belongings, while Xie was seated beside Wang Yifu in a casual and carefree fashion. She and Yulu had their backs facing one another, and she was swinging her legs back and forth while snacking on some sunflower seeds. All of a sudden, Cui Chan stomped a foot down as he exclaimed, "They're finally here!" Wang Yifu remained facing away from Yulu as he said in a quiet voice, "Look after yourself, Your Highness." Yulu smiled as he nodded in response. "Likewise, General Wang." Wang Yifu also gave a slight nod, and he was just about to say something else when Xie clapped her hands together, having just finished a large handful of sunflower seeds, and she said in a light and airy voice, "There's no need for an esteemed general like yourself to speak to lowly prisoners like us. I owe your master a great debt," Wang Yifu said with a wry smile. Xie rested her hands on her knees as she looked up at the sky, and she smiled as she replied, "In that case, you should be saying this to all of those people who've passed away. I took no part in that battle and I didn't take my own life after the event either. On the contrary, I'm doing quite well, and I'm about to become a student of the new Mountain Cliff Academy very soon, so there's no reason for you to be telling me this, General Wang." "Don't mind her, Wang Yifu," Yulu interjected. "She's just a child who hasn't grown up yet, and she has all this pent-up anger, but doesn't know who to vent her frustrations on, so she's lashing out at anyone that she can. Do you still think you're the revered prince of the Lu Empire?" Xie scoffed. "What right do you have to condescend me like this?" Yulu smiled and offered no response as he continued to organize his belongings. Meanwhile, Wang Yifu was feeling a little exasperated. If it weren't for the fact that he was concerned for the safety of these two children, there was no way that he would have agreed to serve Song Jisen's mother. Chan Pingin's group was traveling southward along the official road when he suddenly spotted a familiar young boy rushing toward him. The boy was displaying such glowing enthusiasm that he seemed even more ecstatic to see Chan Pingin than a young maiden would have been to see the man of her dreams. The young boy was none other than Cui Chan, and there was a dazzling smile on his face as he declared, "Chan Pingin, I know this might sound like a joke to you, but I'm telling you now with the utmost sincerity and seriousness that from this day forth, I am your student. If you won't accept me as your student, then I'll kill myself right here and now. Once I'm dead, Don't forget to erect a tombstone for me and engrave the words, "The grave of Chan Ping'an's disciple," onto the tombstone. Chan Ping'an was stunned into silence, and only after a long while did he return to his senses as he asked, "What's your real name?" "Cui Dongshan." Cui Chan replied with a wide smile. Chan Ping'an nodded in response. "All right, I'll make sure to include your name on the tombstone as well." Cui Chan wasn't surprised by this response, and he said in a patient manner, "I know you have some reservations about me and think that I'm harboring ulterior motives, but you can observe me for a while before you decide whether you want to accept me as your first disciple. At the moment, my cultivation base isn't anything special, but I have a decent wealth of knowledge and experience, and I know the customs and traditions of Great Sui Nation like the back of my own hand, so having me accompany you on your journey to Great Sui Nation will make a world of difference." Cui Chan could see that Chan Ping'an was still completely unmoved, but he wasn't disheartened by this, and he continued, "Rest assured, I haven't just come here empty-handed to ask you to accept me as your disciple. Instead, I've prepared a set of extremely precious presents for you, one of which is a copy of the Blessed Beast and Spirit album, which is something that virtually every traveling cultivator of the middle 5 tiers has a copy of. On top of that, my copy is even more precious because it's naturally nurtured 5 or 6 types of spirits." Cui Chan was counting off his presents one by one on his fingers as he continued. "There's also a set of 4 treasures of the study, out of which the brush holds an ink-devouring fish. Regardless of whether you decide to write or paint using the brush after you're done, there's no need to wash the brush as the ink-devouring fish will gobble up all of the ink. Isn't that amazing? Surely you have to agree that this is an exceptional tool for any scholar. As for the ink, it's 3-fold pine rustle ink. Tap the ink stick with your fingers, and it'll produce a pleasant sound like the rustling of pine needles in the wind. Even if you use only a tiny amount of the ink to write something, the fragrance of the ink will still linger for many years. The inkstone is an ancient artifact left behind by a nameless old monk from another continent, and it's called the Pond of Release. Are you not intrigued? The paper is golden stone sheet, a type of paper that is used by emperors to officially assign mountain and river gods." Cui Chan took a deep breath here, then continued, "The most important present I have for you is a half-dead bonded flying sword. It's forged from an exceptional material and is peerlessly sharp. The best thing about it is that you won't need to nurture its sword chi or develop its sword intent. Instead, you'll essentially be able to use it right away. I obtained the flying sword by chance, and it's been a cherished piece in my collection for many years. I haven't refined it this entire time, not because I don't think it's a good sword, but instead because I'm not a swordsman, so it would be a terrible waste for me to refine such a fine flying sword." Initially, Cui Chan was full of vigor and enthusiasm, but his voice was becoming quieter and quieter as he spoke. He discovered that not only did Chan Ping'an not seem to be tempted by his presence in the slightest, on the contrary, the more presents he rattled off, the more resolute the look of refusal in Chan Ping'an's eyes became. A dejected look appeared on Cui Chan's face as he clasped his hands together in front of his chest and asked in a pitiable manner, "Is that still not enough? I've come here with full sincerity to become your student. If you don't believe me, I can swear a vow. If I harbor even the slightest bit of ill will toward you, then let me be struck down by lightning right where I stand." "No," Chan Ping'an declared in an implacable voice with a shake of his head. Chan Ping'an first saw Cui Chan back at Master Ruan's blacksmith shop, and at the time, he had mistaken the boy to be Wu Yuan's scholarly attendant. During their second meeting at the archway, Cui Chan had taken the initiative to speak to Chan Ping'an, referring to himself as Uncle Cui Chan. He had revealed a bunch of strange and inexplicable insider information to Chan Ping'an, then followed him to Clay Vase Alley, where he had stolen the couplets plastered on the gate of Song Jisen's yard. Unlike in Kai Jinjian's case, Chan Ping'an had never sensed any killing intent from Cui Chan, but he definitely didn't trust Cui Chan either. He was hoping that Cui Chan would stay away from him, and never did he think that Cui Chan would follow him all the way to the border of the Great Li Empire. Chan Ping'an was no idiot, and he knew that Cui Chan's intentions definitely weren't pure. Otherwise, why would he have followed him all the way to the border and offered up so many precious gifts just to become his student? Cui Chan took a subtle glance at Chan Ping'an's hair, only to discover that the jade hairpin had already disappeared. According to their prior agreement, the old man would put in a word for him with Chen Ping'an. At the very least, the old man wouldn't reveal to Chen Ping'an the fact that he was the Greatly Empire's imperial preceptor, nor would he expose the plot that Cui Chan had hatched against Chen Ping'an and Qi Jingchen. As for why the old man was letting him off the hook so easily and why he had decided to emerge from the forest of virtue at a time like this, when the outcome of the situation had clearly already been decided, Cui Chan couldn't be bothered to try and deduce the reasons behind all of this. Trying to compete against a true sage in calculation and deduction would have been a completely futile endeavor. In particular, his soul was split up, and his cultivation base and stamina were both far inferior to their past standards. He was afraid that once he reached a certain depth in his deduction, he would inadvertently break certain rules set by the old man and be reduced to a mentally handicapped husk of a person, just like the fate that had befallen the original host of this body. Chen Ping'an, did you not encounter an old scholar who informed you of the situation at Red Candle Town's Pillow Relay Station? Cui Chan asked. Chen Ping'an's brows furrowed slightly in befuddlement. Cui Chan carefully examined Chen Ping'an's expression, and he could tell that Chen Ping'an wasn't faking his reaction. Alright, in that case, I'll have to bring out my trump card, but let me make this clear in advance, Chen Ping'an. I've come to you with all the sincerity in the world, yet you've turned me down in such a cruel manner, so I've decided to reduce my presents to you by half. This is your final chance to change your mind. Chen Ping'an offered no response as he promptly turned to leave, and Cui Chan hurriedly pulled a black ghost stone out of his sleeve upon seeing this, then tossed it onto an empty area by the side of the official road. This is a message left to you by Old Man Yang. Once you crush the ghost stone, you'll learn about the events that led up to this. After that, you'll have to help me prove my innocence and tell Chen Ping'an that I have no ulterior motives. I came here with the sole intention to become his student, and my intentions are pure and earnest. The Yin God didn't reveal himself, but the black ghost stone that was capable of storing verbal messages abruptly disintegrated in mid-air. Shortly thereafter, Lin Shui approached Chen Ping'an with a peculiar expression, and he whispered, "The Yin God says that Old Man Yang of the Yang family's medicine shop has told you to place your trust in Cui Dongshan, and that he won't try to plot against you. He says that you should treat him like a servant and do with him as you see fit on the way to Great Sui Nation's Mountain Cliff Academy, and that it would be a waste not to accept a free disciple like this. He also said that from now on, Cui Dongshan's fate is intertwined with yours, and that your safety is integral to his survival, so he wouldn't dare to harbor any ill will against you." Chen Ping'an nodded in response, then asked, "Who are they?" A smile appeared on Cui Chan's face as he introduced, "The tall idiot is called Yu Lu, Lu as in fortune, and the little dark-skinned girl is called Xie Xie, as in thank you. I wonder who gave her such a ridiculous name." Cui Chan then put on a sorrowful expression that was so fake that it wouldn't even have fooled a blind man, and he sighed. "Both of them are former citizens of the fallen Lu Empire, and the tragedy that they've had to endure truly saddens me." Xie Xie had already studied at Mountain Cliff Academy for some time in the past, while Yu Lu wasn't as fortunate. Not long after he left his hometown, the battle between the Greatly Empire and Lu Empire commenced, so both of them were forced to return home. Now that their empire has fallen, the only reason they've been spared is because they're students of Mountain Cliff Academy. If I don't take them to Mountain Cliff Academy, they'll be sure to perish in the mountains to the west of your Dragon Spring County. They'll either be beaten to death by some mountain god who finds them to be an eyesore, or they'll be forced to fend for themselves in the cruel environment of the mountains and die of exhaustion before they even reach 30 years of age. That's why they're extremely grateful to me, and insist on referring to me as young master. I've tried to tell them that it's not necessary, but they refuse to listen." Xie Xie smiled as she interjected, "If you feel like it's a burden on your shoulders for us to refer to you as young master, then I won't call you that anymore." Thankfully, Yu Lu didn't try to escalate the situation, and he merely smiled as he said, "I'm already used to calling you young master, so I'll continue to do so." Cui Chan turned to Xie Xie with a fake smile as he said, "Thank you for being so thoughtful, Xie Xie." After a period of silence, Lin Shui seemed to have received another message from the Yin God, and he continued in a quiet voice, "Old Man Yang says that it would be best for us to take in Yu Lu and Xie Xie, and that it would only benefit us to do so. He says that if you really don't want to accept Cui Dongshan as your student, then you can just use him as a meat shield. If you encounter any danger in the future, you can just get him to take the fall for you." He's carrying a pocket treasure, so he has a lot of resources at his disposal and can withstand a great deal of punishment. Cui Chan had been eavesdropping on Lin Shuyi this entire time, and he immediately flared up with rage upon hearing this. "Old man Yang, you backstabbing old fart. How could you do this to me?" Chan Ping'an smiled as he asked in a low voice, "If I take in those two, will they be your schoolmates in the future?" A wry smile appeared on Lin Shuyi's face as he replied, "Perhaps. Truth be told, neither Li Baoping nor I have much of an idea about the true situation in Mountain Cliff Academy, and Mr. Ma didn't tell us anything during our previous trip out of the town." Li Huai had been stealing furtive glances at Yu Lu this entire time, and he felt like this was someone that he could get along with. At the very least, he certainly seemed more approachable than the short-tempered and violent Li Baoping and the cold and aloof Lin Shuyi. Yu Lu was carrying some heavy luggage on his back, and upon noticing the glances Li Huai was casting his way, he smiled and nodded at Li Huai in response. Meanwhile, Li Baoping was occasionally taking glances at Xie Xie, and their eyes had met on more than one occasion. In direct contrast with that time when they had encountered the blind old Taoist priest and his disciples, where Li Baoping had immediately taken a liking to the round-faced little girl with the nickname of Jor, Li Baoping couldn't bring herself to feel any fondness towards Xie Xie. There was a smile on Xie Xie's face, making it impossible to glean her true emotions, but she was also not very fond of Li Baoping. This was the first time that the two of them had ever met, so this mutual hostility that they felt toward one another clearly had nothing to do with reason or logic. Chan Ping'an turned to Cui Chan as he said, "Yu Lu and Xie Xie can join us, but you can't." Cui Chan's smile immediately faded as he asked, "Why?" "Because I don't think you're a good person," Chan Ping'an replied. This was a rather childish statement from Chan Ping'an, but no one found it to be amusing. Even Li Huai, who was always carefree and never fazed by anything, could feel a sense of suffocating pressure in the air. Yu Lu turned to look behind him, and he discovered a large cloud of dust in the distance. The earth was trembling in a dull manner under a set of pounding horse hooves, and the ground resembled a lowly peasant that had been whipped into submission, only just barely clinging onto life as they suffered in silence. The mighty aura of the Great Li Empire's cavaliers swept through the air, and even though it was only a unit of 30 to 40 light cavalry units, they were still giving off a sense of menacing killing intent. Yu Lu's eyes narrowed involuntarily upon seeing this. Meanwhile, Cui Chan extended his hands out of his sleeves, then brought them down in a calming gesture, doing his best to maintain his composure as he said, "I came here to become your student because an old scholar insisted that I do so. If you refuse to accept me as your student, then that's fine. I'll simply accompany you on your journey to Mountain Cliff Academy as Yu Lu and Xie Xie's young master, and you can all just pretend that I don't exist. How about that?" Chan Ping'an nodded in response. "As long as you don't mess with me and stop trying to make me accept you as my student, you can do whatever you want." Cui Chan was just about to say something when the unit of cavaliers thundered past. Yu Lu had been observing the unit of cavaliers this entire time, and he had already lowered his head while also raising an arm, using his sleeve to shield himself from the dust. Meanwhile, Xie Xie had already moved off the official road. Unfortunately for Cui Chan, he just so happened to be wearing a pristine white robe. As the formidable unit of cavaliers stormed past, Cui Chan was rooted to the spot with his entire body covered in dust. His mouth was still open, but he was unable to utter even a single word. Li Huai couldn't help but take pity on Cui Chan, and he mused to himself, "I'm beginning to feel a little sorry for him." Meanwhile, Chan Ping'an wiped the dirt and grime from his face, and he murmured to himself with a dazed expression, "What have I done to deserve this?" According to the rules established by Ruan Qiong, any cultivators traveling through what was once Zhuhou's small world were prohibited from flying or traveling atop flying swords, unless they had express permission from the Great Li Empire's imperial court. Following the killing spree that Ruan Qiong had gone on to set an example, all of the cultivators in the Great Li Empire had accepted this rather unreasonable rule. Lu Baqiao descended from the sky atop his flying sword outside Zhuhou's small world, and after paying some silver, he got into one of the lavish horse-drawn carriages prepared exclusively for cultivators at the relay station. He traveled by carriage to the new school founded by the Dragon Tail County Chang clan, where he found his good friend, Chan Songfeng, personally teaching a class of around a dozen children. Upon spotting Lu Baqiao through the window, Qian Songfeng immediately wanted to find someone else to teach the class in his stead, but Lu Baqiao hurriedly waved a hand, indicating that he was happy to wait. An hour later, the lesson concluded, and all of the children extended respectful bows to their teacher, following which Qian Songfeng quickly made his way out of the classroom. Upon arriving by Lu Baqiao's side, he took a glance at Lu Baqiao's sword with an intrigued expression, then asked, "So this is the talismanic sword in the dragon locking well of the Great Li Empire's capital city?" Lu Baqiao rolled his eyes in an exaggerated fashion, then clasped his hands behind the back of his head as he complained, "That bastard Song Chongjing promised that he was going to save the talismanic sword for me to pull out once I get to the capital. On the way there, I heard a bunch of stories about how someone had already taken the talismanic sword. I didn't believe them, thinking that Song Chongjing had only spread a false rumor to placate everyone so that no one would attempt to take the talismanic sword before I got there. But when I did get there, I discovered that the sword had already been taken by some woman called Donghua." Lu Baqiao was becoming more and more furious as he spoke. "I went to Song Chongjing to demand an explanation, and guess what happened? All he did was get someone to pass on a message to me, telling me that if I want the sword, then I should seek out Donghua and take it from her by force. Never in my life have I seen such a shameless 10th-tier grandmaster. After that, I learned that this Donghua had become the official goddess of the Iron Talisman River in this county. What can I say? That's life, I suppose." As Xie returned to the campsite, Lin Shui and the Azure Maidens game was wrapping up. Xie took a glance at the state of the game, then quickly lost interest as she approached the campfire to warm her hands. Chen Ping'an cut down a series of branches and used them to pitch 3 crude tents, then arrived beside Li Baoping, who quickly went to bed while yawning in a weary manner. Out of the 2 remaining tents, one of them was shared by Li Huai and Lin Shui, while Xie also had a tent to herself. Yu Lu often slept on the coach driver's spot on the horse-drawn carriage, and he would be able to spend the night with a blanket wrapped around him. Of course, on the vast majority of nights, they would be able to find someplace to stay in, such as an inn or a temple in the forest. Once on a stormy night, they stumbled upon a wealthy residence thanks to the faint glimmers of lantern fire in the night, and the owner of the residence was a former minister of the Ministry of Revenue. He was an old man who had constructed this residence to live in the mountains following his retirement, and he had been very hospitable. He was very pleased to have seen Li Baoping and the other children who were on their journey to seek out an education, and even after he learned that they were from the Great Li Empire, which was technically an enemy of Great Sui Nation, he still treated everyone with warm hospitality. When it came to his preparation of food and drinks, he strictly abided by the sagely teachings of using the best possible ingredients prepared as meticulously as possible, and it had truly been an eye-opening experience for Chen Ping'an and his group of little hillbillies. The old man became particularly fond of Li Baoping and Yu Lu, and after learning that Li Baoping liked to read travel journals, not only did he gift her a few travel journals from his private collection, he also insisted on taking Chen Ping'an and his group to a nearby scenic location, which turned out to be an extremely renowned cliff in the area, standing on the bank of a river. The surface of the cliff was as smooth as a mirror, and there were ancient engravings on the cliff that had been there for countless years. The script of the text engraved onto the cliff had never been seen anywhere else, and it was extremely difficult to read. Countless scholars throughout history had visited the cliff just to be able to see these engravings, and rubbings of the engravings were widely distributed throughout Yellow Court Nation and Great Sui Nation, but still to this day, no one had been able to discern the true meaning of the text. Everyone had their own opinion on what the text meant, but there was no consensus that could be settled on. At the time, Cui Chan had only taken a glance at the cliff from afar before declaring that the engravings had been made by the Heavenly Lord of Lightning, and that it contained a warning from the Heavenly Emperor to a flood dragon. The old man immediately burst into laughter upon hearing this, clearly not taking Cui Chan seriously. Countless scholars of the past had made extensive efforts to try and decipher the text engraved on the cliff, yet not a single one of them had dared to proclaim that they knew the meaning of the text, so it was no wonder that the old man wouldn't take a casual remark from a 15-year-old boy seriously. After leaving the former minister's estate, Chen Ping'an noticed that whenever he prepared meals for everyone using the earthen stoves that he constructed in the wilderness, they would always look at him with rather peculiar expressions. In particular, on one occasion Li Baoping had suddenly declared completely out of the blue, "Junior uncle, the food that you make is really delicious. I'm not lying to you. Your food is just as good as the food we had at Minister Ma's house." Li Huai was also feeling a little sleepy, so he retired to the tent after notifying Lin Shuyi. However, Lin Shuyi still had no intention of sleeping, and he continued to play games of Go with the Azure Maiden. Following the conclusion of their games, Lin Shuyi told Chan Ping'an that he was going to accompany the Azure Maiden back to her mountaintop temple to grab the precious Go manual concealed within the cavity wall of the temple. In order to reassure Chan Ping'an and put any potential concerns he may have had to rest, Lin Shuyi explained that the Azure Maiden had intended to return to her temple on her own, but he had volunteered to accompany her. Thus, Chan Ping'an couldn't say anything other than caution Lin Shuyi to take care walking up the mountain at night. With that, Lin Shuyi began to scale the mountain with the Azure Maiden, while Chan Ping'an looked on from afar. It seemed that there were some rules on the mountain that had to be followed, as evidenced by the fact that the Azure Maiden was gliding along with her feet hovering above the ground. Furthermore, a ghostly green flame had appeared in front of her to illuminate their surroundings, and she and Lin Shuyi were chatting spiritedly with one another. So not only was this not a harrowing sight to behold, it was instead much like the candlelit nightly strolls described in Li Baoping's travel journal. Following Xiexie's departure, Cui Chan continued to stand by himself on the branch. Occasionally, harrowing owl calls would abruptly ring out in the night. These birds were referred to as displaced birds by the citizens of Yellow Court Nation, and they were considered to be a bad omen, often associated with harbingers of doom and bringers of bad news. A plume of black smoke surged through the forest before coming to a rest beside Cui Chan. Cui Chan snapped out of his jumbled thoughts as he asked, "Are you leaving?" The Yin god from the town nodded in response. "Those amulets bestowed upon me by Old Man Yang are indeed able to ward off the damage inflicted upon me by the astral winds and the city passes, but the amulets are only just enough to support me over the course of a return journey to and from the border of the Great Li Empire. Now that I've accompanied everyone to Yellow Court Nation, this is already further than where I was supposed to go, and I may begin to struggle upon reaching Embroidered Flower River and Wanping County." The Yin god's features resembled rippling water or a flickering flame, constantly transitioning in an indistinct manner as he mused. "I don't know what kind of deal you made with Old Man Yang, but I hope that you can settle things with Chan Ping'an and the others in an amicable fashion." Cui Chan was quite polite to the Yin god and replied, "I'll try my best." The Yin god suddenly smiled and asked, "Do you believe in karma, esteemed imperial preceptor?" Cui Chan shook his head in response. "I've never believed in karma. If you want to advise me to do good deeds to accumulate good karma, then I have some advice for you as well. People of different aspirations and principles will ultimately walk different paths. As opposed to worrying about whether I'll protect Chan Ping'an or not, you should be worrying about whether your wife and son are being used as a pair of pawns by the river-severing true lord of Lake Shujian." The Yin god heaved a resigned sigh. "There are limits even to what humans can do, let alone a Yin creature detested by heaven and earth like me. There are no dead ends in the pursuit of the great Tao. It's just that some paths are more arduous than others," Cui Chan said. "Those who gather Yin energy will become spirits, while those who gather Yang energy will become gods. And it has nothing to do with whether you're human or not. It's not like you don't have the chance to ascend to godhood someday. Think about those mountain spirits. Their path of cultivation is truly arduous." "That is indeed true," the Yin god chuckled, then fell silent for a long while, displaying no intention to set off on his journey back to the Great Li Empire. "Do you still have something else to tell me?" Cui Chan asked. "I know that aside from repaying a debt, you also regard Chan Ping'an in a very favorable light yourself. However, I'm sure that you're unaware that I had already earmarked Chan Ping'an for great things from the very beginning, earlier than anyone else. I can't tell you the exact details as they concern some secrets pertaining to my pursuit of the Great Tao, but what I can tell you is that even back when I was in the capital, I had set my sights on Chan Ping'an no later than Old Man Yang did, and I also invested no less attention into Chan Ping'an than Old Man Yang. That has nothing to do with what I want to say," the Yin god replied with a smile and a shake of his head. Cui Chan's brows furrowed slightly as he snapped, "If you have something to say, then hurry up. I'm not in a good mood right now." The Yin god was unfazed by the turn in Cui Chan's demeanor, and he said, I admire you very much for your doctrine of placing more weight into practical ability and contributions to the empire and to the people. Many Confucians denounce your doctrine, and you have more detractors than supporters, but I firmly believe that in the centuries and millennia to come, your doctrine will eventually be adopted and widely supported by the masses. Cui Chan was rather taken aback to hear this, and he raised an eyebrow as he turned to the ENGSUB with a surprised expression. I didn't know that you supported my doctrine. In response, the ENGSUB made a surprising gesture, extending a deep and respectful bow, the type that was extended by students of Confucianism towards senior sagely figures, and he said, "This bow of mine is not being extended to the imperial preceptor of the Greatly Empire. Instead, it is a gesture of admiration that I'm extending to you for daring to propose a new doctrine despite the widespread condemnation." Only after the ENGSUB had traveled hundreds of kilometers away did Cui Chan slowly return to his senses, and a mixture of sorrow and gratification appeared on his face. He took a step forward, causing the branch beneath his feet to bow even further, and he abruptly shook out his sleeves before clasping his hands behind his back. The defeated look in his eyes had completely faded, and he was brimming with purpose and intent once again. As Lin Shui returned to the campsite, there was a furious look on his face, and he sat down beside the campfire with an ancient book held tightly in his hand. "What's wrong?" Chen Ping'an asked. Lin Shui spat through gritted teeth. "Those absolute scoundrels! If those scholars from Yellow Court Nation were to do nothing more than gather for drinks in the temple, then I would have nothing to say. But how could they do something so despicable and unsightly? They're a disgrace to all of the scholars in the entire world. If I were the Azure Maiden, I would have already evicted those bastards out of the temple by force. Regardless of what they did, the Azure Maiden herself hasn't done anything to them, isn't that right?" Chen Ping'an asked. Lin Shui nodded in response. "In that case, you'll have to learn to adapt and accept," Chen Ping'an said. Lin Shui raised his head to look at Chen Ping'an with a rather perplexed expression, and as soon as he caught sight of Chen Ping'an's face, he was immediately instilled with an inexplicable sense of calmness and tranquility. He heaved a faint sigh, then replied in a quiet voice, "I understand." On the summit of Horizontal Mountain was a small temple with no plaque hanging over the entrance. Outside the temple was a massive and lush cypress tree that seemed to have been there since ancient times. The area outside the temple was brightly lit by a series of lanterns, and there were around a dozen men and women who appeared to be servants gathered outside the temple in small groups, chatting quietly with one another. Inside the temple were 5 or 6 men of ages ranging from 20 to 40 who were drinking with one another. Their faces were flushed red with the alcohol that they consumed, and peals of laughter were ringing out incessantly, while a series of opened wine jugs were strewn all over the ground. These men appeared to have come from noble backgrounds, as evidenced by their speech and mannerisms, and they were discussing all types of topics, including politics and recent events. In a drunken state, one of the men stripped down to expose his upper body, then raised his wine cup up high as he turned to the statue of the Azure Maiden and chortled, "I don't care if you're a god or a spirit, I'm not afraid. If you dare to reveal yourself, then I have the courage to invite you to drink with us. Azure Maiden, if you're willing to step down from your pedestal tonight, then that would be sure to make for a fantastic story, and you'll be revered for generations to come. To you, Azure Maiden." The drunken man was stumbling around unsteadily as he threw his head back to consume his cup of wine, but most of it spilled onto his body and the ground. His friends were constantly throwing jibes at him, and one of them was emboldened by the alcohol, declaring that he was going to carry the Azure Maiden statue down from the pedestal and sleep with it that night. In doing so, he would be sleeping with a goddess, and that was a story that he would have been able to tell for a very long time. His blasphemous words drew an even louder chorus of laughter from the group of men, but at the same time, an inaudible sigh rang out within the temple. A gentle breeze blew past, and the group of men continued to drink, with none of them sensing anything amiss. Halfway up the mountain, Chen Ping'an was in the midst of his standing meditation when his attention was suddenly drawn to something, and he looked down to find Xie approaching him on the ground below with a branch in her hand. Chen Ping'an was just about to get down from the branch that he was standing on when Xie raised her head to look up at him with a smile, and she waved her branch around as she said in her naturally seductive voice, "There's no need for you to come down, we can have a chat up there." As soon as her voice trailed off, She began to rush forward in an agile manner before springing up and treading onto a large tree. Using the tree as a launching pad, she sprang toward another tree. And by repeating this process, she was able to quickly rise up through the air. After just a few steps, she had already arrived on a branch near the one that Chen Ping'an was perched on, and it was clear that she was not just some ordinary, untrained girl. Xie turned to the side as she sat down onto the branch, swinging her feet back and forth as she said with a smile, "You're a martial artist while I'm a cultivator, so we're not quite the same." In the eyes of the arrogant cultivators, martial artists are just people with no aptitude for cultivation, so they were forced to settle for something inferior and turn to martial arts instead. That's why the 9 tiers of martial arts are denounced as the 9 lowly tiers. Essentially, cultivators are like formal officials of the imperial court, while martial artists can be likened to lowly informal officials, and the former looks down on the latter, ultimately resulting in mutual hostility and resentment. "Why are you telling me all of this?" Chen Ping'an asked. Xie set the branch in her hand horizontally down across her legs, then replied in a direct and straightforward manner, "It seems like Cui Dongshan has truly run out of options, and he's desperately trying to explore any option that he can. He approached me in private and told me that if I can put in a good word for him with you, even if you continue to refuse to accept him as your student, he'll still give me a treasure. Of course, I wanted that ownerless flying sword of his, but he refused to give it to me. Instead, he was only willing to promise me a bamboo flute after I did his bidding. He showed me the flute, and it was a genuine fish bug flute, which was once part of the Lu Empire's secret imperial collection. It was one of the tokens that represented the alliance forged between a sect and the Lu Empire's first-ever emperor, and as a woman, I'm naturally fond of all of the beautiful things in this world, so that's why I came to find you." Seeing as he had company, Chen Ping'an ceased his standing meditation and also sat down onto his branch with an upright posture, looking directly at Xie as he prompted, "I'm listening, please continue." Xie smiled as she replied, "That's all I had to say. I only brought up the differences between martial artists and cultivators as an icebreaker to kick off the conversation. To tell you the truth, it's been very cathartic for me to see Cui Dongshan being turned away by you over and over again, but now that I've been tasked with putting in a good word for him, I have no idea what to do. I'm worried that you'll turn me down without even hearing what I have to say. If that happens, then that fish bug flute that I've been promised will slip through my hands." Chen Ping'an nodded as he said, "If Cui Dongshan asks, then I'll tell him that you've already put in a good word for him. If possible, would you be able to tell me more about matters related to martial arts?" Xie examined Chen Ping'an's face through narrowed eyes, as if she were trying to see right through him, and she replied in a gentle voice, "When it comes to matters related to martial arts, everything that I know is just hearsay anyway, so there's no reason why I can't share this information with you. The reason I know about some of these basic concepts is because for cultivators the lower 5 tiers concern the refinement of the body, so there's a lot of overlap with martial arts training, and that's also why they're referred to as the lower 5 tiers. She extended a finger and pointed at a few parts of Chen Ping'an's body as she continued. There are over 300 acupoints in the human body, and they're all interconnected like a winding mountain range. For martial artists, the first tier is the clay embryo tier. And at that tier, one needs to find the qi within, then help it locate the most suitable acupoint for it to dwell in. This is where the disparity in aptitude between martial arts practitioners is reflected. Surely someone has told you about this before, right? Chen Ping'an was listening attentively to Xie's description, and upon hearing her question he replied, "I have heard about this in the past, but I don't mind listening to it a few more times, so please continue, and there's no need to consider whether I've already heard something before." Xie was unconsciously patting the branch sitting on her lap as she raised her chin slightly and cast her gaze toward an even higher spot than the branch that Chen Ping'an was situated on. The so-called martial arts prodigies are those who can find that burst of qi at a very young age, and select an important acupoint for that burst of qi to reside in, rather than some insignificant acupoint in an obscure part of the body. In fulfilling these two prerequisites, one will have an inherent advantage over others. It would be like someone taking over a small hill in the wilderness, or an unfrequented graveyard, while someone else has taken over a prosperous town like Red Candle Town, and there's even someone who's taken over the capital city of the Great Li Empire. Those three are naturally in completely different positions. The third deciding factor on whether one is a martial arts prodigy or not is the thickness, density, and length of that burst of qi in their body. Even if your acupoint is the equivalent of the Greatly Empire's capital, if you don't have the ability to tap into your potential, then it will all have been for naught. Does that make sense to you? It does, Chen Ping'an replied. The bonded flying sword that Cui Dongshan had been referring to is a flying sword that is nurtured within the bonded acupoint of a swordsman. Such a flying sword is fused as one with the soul of the swordsman, and when it flies out of the swordsman's acupoint to cut down an enemy, it will take on a substantial form, but upon returning to the acupoint, it will revert back to an intangible form, so it's quite a profound object. My master once told me that the acupoints in the human body can be likened to small worlds in that they possess properties similar to pocket treasures. If one can fully harness their bonded acupoint through cultivation, then they'll be able to fit anything in the acupoint, regardless of whether that be a flying sword, or even a treasure as massive as a mountain. For martial artists, the key to reaching the second tier is to expand the pathways in one's body with the bonded acupoint as the starting point, expanding and smoothing out the narrow and rugged meridians into official roads. Why is it that there are so many types of martial arts in the world? The reason for this lies in the different paths that one can take. One starting point, the paths that they take, the shortcuts that they follow. Each type of martial art has its own secret method that cannot be passed on to outsiders. For example, the meridians opened up by martial arts who practice fist techniques will be completely different from the ones opened up by those who specialize in using different types of weapons. Chen Ping'an, I can tell that you're currently establishing a foundation in the second tier. And that's why you're working so tirelessly in your walking meditation, standing meditation, and fist technique practice. At your rate of progression, I'm sure you'll be able to reach the third tier very soon. By the way, can you tell me where your bonded acupoint is? No, Chen Ping'an refused with a shake of his head. Why so stingy? Xie grumbled with a scornful look on her face. However, she then thought of the predicament that Cui Chan was in, and she immediately felt like it was only normal for Chen Ping'an to turn down her request, given his personality. To put it in rather unflattering terms, Chen Ping'an's personality was like a rock in a latrine, and it was as stinky as it was unyielding. On the flip side, one could also say that he possessed a resolute personality and unshakable resolve. What makes you think that I should be able to reach the third tier very soon? Chen Ping'an suddenly asked. Xie replied. Martial artists rely solely on that burst of qi within their bodies. Essentially, a martial artist attains destructive power at the cost of harming their own body. If a martial artist wants to extend their lifespan, then they have to reach the sixth tier as soon as possible. Once they get there, they'll be able to nurture their soul every day in order to reciprocate their body. If a martial artist remains at the second or third tier for too long, then that innate burst of qi will become more and more depleted. Each time they engage in battle against someone and sustain severe injuries, some more of that qi would seep away. Hence, there are countless idiots who have killed themselves through their martial arts training. For martial artists from wealthy clans, they're able to treat their injuries by bathing in water infused with precious medicinal ingredients, but that doesn't address the root of the problem, and they're unable to truly nurture their souls through such means. Even though it's impossible to attain immortality through the pursuit of martial arts, once you get to the pinnacle of martial arts, reaching the 9th tier or even the legendary 10th tier, you'll be able to easily live for a century or two. I don't think that's entirely correct, Chen Ping'an countered. Martial arts practitioners who possess outstanding aptitude can seek to climb up the ranks quickly, but for someone like me with mediocre aptitude, the more I hurry, the more prone I am to making mistakes, so it's better for me to be slow and steady with each step that I take. As long as I don't make any mistakes, I'll be heading in the right direction. Besides, I'm not practicing training martial arts to pursue those lofty tiers. I'm merely doing this to strengthen my own body. At the end, Chen Ping'an decided to go with a more euphemistic explanation rather than telling the truth, which was that he was practicing martial arts for the sake of survival. After what Kai Jinjian had done to him, not only had he been deprived of any chance to pursue the path of cultivation, his body was left in terrible condition as well. During the battle on Go Table Mountain, the injuries that he had suffered had resulted in the complete eradication of the lifespan that he had painstakingly accumulated. Thankfully, throughout the rest of the southbound journey, Chun Ping'an had managed to establish a foundation once again through extensive daily walking and standing meditation, and he could clearly sense an improvement in his physical condition. His body was like a dilapidated old house that was leaking wind everywhere, but it wasn't a completely lost cause, and its condition could still be improved through some crude repair jobs. Xie smiled as she said, "Everyone experiences a different rate of progression in martial arts. If you feel like it's better to take the slow and steady route, then I'm sure that's fine." As a cultivator, Xie didn't know much about martial arts training to begin with, and she often habitually applied cultivation concepts to martial arts training. Even though she had seen and experienced more than Zhuhou, she was definitely not as familiar with the fine nuances of martial arts training as a fifth-tier martial artist like Zhuhou. Furthermore, the patriarch of the Li clan on Fortune Street had personally praised Zhuhou as a brilliant martial arts teacher, and that was sufficient testament to how outstanding Zhuhou was at instructing others in martial arts training. However, Zhuhou was limited by the fact that he had lived in the small town his entire life, so just like the vast majority of martial artists in the world, he firmly believed that the 9th tier was already the very pinnacle for martial artists, and that was why he referred to the 9th tier as the N tier. In reality, there was still a 10th tier above the 9th tier. The two tiers were separated by only a single number, but the disparity between the two was massive, even more so than the gulf between the 6th tier and the 9th tier. Martial arts training was completely unrelated to the pursuit of the Great Tao, so even if a martial artist were to attain a body that was even more resolute than the indestructible Vajra body of Buddhism, it would still be quite difficult for them to accomplish much. Setting aside everything else, their short lifespan was a massive obstacle that stood in their way. A curious look appeared on Chun Ping'an's face as he said, "I've always thought that cultivators like yourself were transcendent and carefree beings who stand above all of us ordinary people. Yet you just mentioned that even cultivators have to engage in refinement of the body. Why is that?" Back in the town, Ning Yao had once warned him that even though people like Kai Jinjian of Dawn Cloud Mountain and Fu Nanhua of Old Dragon City were bound by the restrictions of the town, their physical bodies were still far superior to those of the average person, and neither of them would have been able to easily kill him with a single punch. In contrast, it would be very difficult for Chun Ping'an to kill a cultivator like them unless he struck them in a vital region. While staying overnight in the wilderness, it was imperative for someone to be on lookout duty throughout the night. Prior to reaching the pillow relay station of Red Candle Town, Chun Ping'an had been responsible for lookout duty during the first half of the night, while Zhuhou had taken over for the second half of the night. Now that Zhuhou was no longer with the group, Lin Shui was the one on lookout duty for the first half of the night, while Chun Ping'an stayed up for the second half of the night, and their role was to keep the campfire going and look out for unexpected attacks. Chun Ping'an was quite familiar with this task. During the process of pottery firing, maintaining the fire was of the utmost importance. Chun Ping'an had served as an apprentice in the kilns for many years, and even though Old Man Yao had never taught him any of the important pottery firing skills as he regarded Chun Ping'an to be lacking in aptitude, Chun Ping'an rarely ever made a mistake while performing all of the other manual labor tasks. Hence, he couldn't have been more familiar with a task like nightly lookout duty, which was a stern test of one's patience and willpower. Furthermore, while staying up in the night, he was left to his own devices in a quiet setting, so he was free to practice the walking and standing meditation stipulated in the Mountain Shaking Guide. Occasionally, he would also be able to weave some straw sandals, or pull out that small chunk of dragon-slaying platform to sharpen Li Baoping's saber. As he had become more proficient in his standing meditation, the fiery dragon-like burst of qi in his body had ultimately chosen a pair of acupoints to reside in. The standing meditation, coupled with Chun Ping'an's breathing techniques, would put him in a profound half-asleep state. Even though the spring chill was lingering for a long time this year, and the heat of summer remained a distant memory of the previous year, Chun Ping'an wouldn't feel cold, even if he were to inadvertently allow the campfire to burn out while he was on lookout duty in the second half of the night. Whenever he ceased in his standing meditation to switch to walking meditation, he would feel a sense of warmth throughout his entire body, and he didn't feel weary at all while traveling during the day. On this night, Chun Ping'an continued to sit beside the campfire to meditate, and the burst of qi within his body quickly traveled along the acupoints near his dantian, much like a carp swimming upstream against the flow of the water. The burst of qi then lingered momentarily in the acupoint that had been vacated by that wisp of sword qi, like a traveler resting briefly in a relay station or a climber taking a break halfway up a mountain, following which it continued to travel upward, making it all the way to the back of Chen Ping'an's neck, then to his glabella in one go. Chen Ping'an opened his eyes and exhaled, then rose to his feet and jumped up and down lightly a few times. All of a sudden, he turned to discover Yulu, who had made his way down from the horse-drawn carriage and was slowly approaching the campfire with a bunch of not-so-dry branches held in his arms. He then squatted down beside the campfire and carefully added the branches to the fire one after another as opposed to casually tossing them in all at once, and the fire quickly began to burn with greater ferocity. Yulu extended his hands toward the fire before rubbing them together, then turned to Chen Ping'an with a smile as he asked, "Chen Ping'an, can I take part in nightly lookout duties as well from now on? You have to practice your standing and walking meditation, and it would be best for you not to get distracted while doing so. I'm sure you can tell that I have a decent level of fitness, so if you're willing to place your trust in me, I'm happy to take over the 4 hours before first light." Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. "I appreciate the kind offer, but at the moment, there's no need for such an arrangement to be made." Yulu knew that Chen Ping'an still didn't trust him enough to place everyone's safety in his hands, but he wasn't bothered by this at all. Instead, he merely nodded and said, "If you ever need me to take over, feel free to tell me. I want to do something for everyone as well. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just a useless burden." Yulu's angular features and bright eyes were illuminated by the fire, and Chen Ping'an could clearly sense his good intentions, so he smiled and replied, "I'll be sure to do so. At this time of year it's already summer, yet the weather is still like late spring," Yulu casually remarked. "The weather has indeed been a bit strange this year," Chen Ping'an agreed. After making some more small talk, Yulu stood up to take his leave, and Chen Ping'an looked on as he departed. According to what Lin Shui had told him in private, Yulu didn't appear to be a particularly exceptional Go player, and he never made any brilliant moves, but in reality, he was a superior Go player to Xie, who had a far more aggressive and attacking style. Chen Ping'an had already noticed that Yulu was extremely meticulous in everything that he did, and Lin Shui agreed with this sentiment, remarking that Yulu was even more reliable and capable than the most experienced and seasoned officials of the imperial court. This was a quality that Chen Ping'an had observed on many occasions. For example, Yulu had only watched Chen Ping'an weave straw sandals on a couple of occasions before he was able to weave his own, and he did so to quite a high standard. In fact, the straw sandals that he was currently wearing had been woven by himself. Another example was whenever Chen Ping'an was fishing, Yulu would often observe off to the side in silence, keeping track of when Chen Ping'an cast his hook, which stretch of water he cast into, how he made his casts, how he tired out big fish on his line, how he pulled fish out of the water, how he prevented fish from slipping off the hook as they leaped out of the water, and many other fine details involved in fishing. On one occasion, Chen Ping'an was busy with something else, so Yulu asked him if he could try his hand at fishing in Chen Ping'an's stead. Even though he had no prior fishing experience, Yulu had done quite well. Chen Ping'an didn't make any remarks about any of this, but he had been observing Yulu closely this entire time. His conclusion was that if Yulu were a good person, then he would definitely be able to do some fantastic deeds, but if he were a bad person, then Chen Ping'an didn't even dare to imagine what he would be capable of. An uneventful night passed by. In addition to the gradually dwindling campfire beside Chen Ping'an, a lamp had been lit in the carriage in the distance, and it had stayed lit the entire night. It seemed that Chui Chan had stayed up the entire night poring over a book. Only a glimmer of light had appeared in the sky when Chen Ping'an commenced his training for the day. He arrived at a spot halfway up horizontal mountain with the most open view and began to practice his fist techniques. As he did so, he was gradually joined by Li Baoping and Lin Shui. As for Li Huai, he had the least perseverance of the three children, and he only joined Chen Ping'an in his fist technique practice for a short while before rushing away. Yulu and Xie were already accustomed to this, and on this day, Chui Chan lifted the curtain before stepping out onto the horse-drawn carriage, where he observed Chen Ping'an's trio's fist technique practice. In the beginning, he had regarded this practice with disdain, often rolling his eyes before retiring back to the carriage. However, as the days passed, he was spending more and more time observing their practice. After breakfast, everyone began to make their way up the mountain path toward the mountain summit. Along the way, they passed by the Azure Maiden Temple and the old cypress tree. If one were to look solely at the size of the tree and ignore the depth of its fortune, then it was already comparable to the old locust tree in Zhuhou's small world. Lin Shui had thought that Chen Ping'an would continue on his way, but to his surprise, Chen Ping'an paid the temple a visit to take a look, then called for Li Baoping, Li Huai, and Lin Shui to enter the temple. As it turned out, the interior of the temple was a complete mess, and there was a strong stench of alcohol in the air. Li Huai looked up at the deity statues on the pedestal in the temple, and no matter how he looked at it, he couldn't see the resemblance between it and the female spirit that had played Go against Lin Shui the night before. Along their journey, Lin Shui was the one who had interacted the most with the Yin god, so he was more familiar with topics related to ghosts and spirits, and he provided an explanation to Li Huai, telling him that due to the fact that many local residents in an area were extremely grateful to the deities that granted them protection, they would often craft the deity statues to take on as flattering a visage as possible. As a result, many deity statues bore no resemblance at all to the actual deities that they represented, but that didn't hinder the deities from being worshipped. It took everyone close to an hour to clean up the temple, and only after that did they continue on their journey. Prior to his departure, Lin Shui stood on his own next to a futon at the foot of the deity statue, then cupped his fist in a parting salute toward the Azure Maiden. At the same time, Cui Chan stepped into the temple with Yu Lu, and the former inspected his surroundings briefly before making his way to the pedestal that the statue stood upon. He took a glance at the dusty little incense burner to find that it was just an ordinary copper burner, but even though it had already been there for centuries, the surface of the burner was still gleaming brightly. There were countless incense snubs bunched together in the burner, and it was evident that even though this temple wasn't listed in Yellow Court Nation's genealogical records, thereby making it an illegal temple that should have shut down, it was clearly a very popular place of worship, particularly given its small size. All of a sudden, Cui Chan instructed, "Yu Lu, you should bow whenever you encounter a temple. In doing so, you'll be accumulating good karma with the land." Yu Lu didn't really understand what he had just been told, but he still followed Cui Chan's instruction and extended 3 bows to the temple. Meanwhile, Xie was standing outside the temple's entrance with the bamboo flute strapped to her waist. After leaving Horizontal Mountain, the group arrived in a prefectural city of Yellow Court Nation. Thankfully, Chen Ping'an and the others had already witnessed the majesty of the border pass, and as the point where 3 rivers converged, Red Candle Town was also quite a bustling and thriving place, so they were already mentally prepared for the sights and scenes that awaited them in cities of the outside world. Even so, Li Huai was still clearly rather timid, and even the painted wooden figures that he often held in his hands had been put back into his little bookcase. The identification and visiting documents for Chen Ping'an's group were from the Great Li Empire's Dragon Spring County, and the procedure for entry into the city was completed very quickly and smoothly. Even though Yellow Court Nation belonged to Great Sui Nation rather than the Great Li Empire, the latter had already conquered the entire northern region of the continent, and its southbound expansion was inevitable. Hence, Yellow Court Nation had always given preferential treatment to traveling scholars from the Great Li Empire, stopping just short of worshipping them as deities. After all, there was a very good chance that Yellow Court Nation was going to become a subsidiary nation to the Great Li Empire at some point. The Lu Empire had once been the northern ruler of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, but not only had the empire collapsed, even all of the members of the imperial clan had been reduced to lowly prisoners, thereby setting an example that Yellow Court Nation would have been foolish to ignore. Prior to entering the city, Chen Ping'an had asked the local residents what scenic locations there were to visit in the city. This was because during their trip to Mountain Cliff Academy, Chen Ping'an wanted Li Baoping and the others to be able to see as many renowned mountains, rivers, temples, and other spectacles of interest as possible, as long as it was safe to do so. He didn't want them to keep their heads down and travel to Mountain Cliff Academy, only to miss out on all of the scenery along the way and end up with only memories of hectic travels and surviving in the wilderness. In this city, they were going to visit the oldest city god temple in Yellow Court Nation. The vastly renowned wall murals in the temple depicted the 18 abysses of punishment, and it was said that the murals were so lifelike that they would make one feel as if they were actually in the abysses of punishment. After asking for some directions, the group made their way toward the city god temple along a wide street. All of a sudden, a commotion suddenly rang out behind them, and Chen Ping'an turned around to discover an astonishing sight, one that he would have never been able to see in the Great Li Empire. There was a group of roughly 7 or 8 distinguished-looking young men and women, all of whom were dressed in flowing attire, and they were led by a white-haired elderly man as they swaggered along the street. One of them was straddled atop a giant black tiger steed, while another had a huge crimson snake that was over 20 feet in length slithering along behind them, and yet another one of them was carrying a massive bull horn bow on their back. The throngs of people on the lively and bustling street quickly parted to create a path for the group of cultivators, and some children who were oblivious to the gravity of the situation were forcibly dragged off the street by their parents to hide in the shops on either side of the street. The owner of the huge crimson snake wasn't making any particular effort to keep the creature in check, and it was slithering along the street in an unrestrained manner. Furthermore, there was red armor fitted over its head and its tail, giving it an even more imposing and menacing appearance. Instead of slithering along in a straight line, it would occasionally stray toward the shops on either side of the street, where it would stop and raise its head to look down on the terrified residents of the city. A small child was so terrified by the snake's menacing gaze that he erupted into tears, and his parents hurriedly clapped their hands over his mouth in horror. Thankfully, the snake continued onward, but right as the child's father heaved a sigh of relief, the snake abruptly whipped its tail into the man's face, sending him somersaulting through the air several times before falling heavily onto the ground. He then threw up a mouthful of blood before struggling to his feet, then fled the scene with his horrified wife and child. Standing far away, Chen Ping'an could see that some of the bystanders were taking pleasure in the family's misfortune, some were cowering in terror, and some were looking on in amazement, but no one seemed to have regarded the snake's actions as inappropriate. Lin Shuyi closed his fingers around the talisman up his sleeve as he stood beside Chen Ping'an, while Li Baoping and Li Huai were standing closer to the shops. The horse-drawn carriage that Cui Chan was in also diverged from its original path, as Yu Lu guided it to the side of the street before bringing it to a halt. The group of immortals quickly arrived beside Chen Ping'an's group, and the old man said something to the group of young cultivators behind him, upon which all of them immediately turned to Chen Ping'an and the others, some with provocative expressions, some with intrigued looks in their eyes. At the same time, the owner of the red snake finally called out to the creature, instructing it to stay by his side. It was clear that the old man had already warned them to be more restrained if they were to encounter fellow cultivators during their travels. While passing by Chen Ping'an's group, the old man gave them a slight smile, posing as some type of profound figure, and he also extended a slight nod toward Lin Shuyi. After that, the two groups separated without any incident. Cui Chan made his way out of the carriage, then kicked Xie aside, even though she wasn't actually blocking his path. He jumped down from the carriage, then declared in an indifferent voice that was audible to Chen Ping'an, "This is how things are like outside of the Great Li Empire." Chen Ping'an could see that only after the group of cultivators had departed did some official guards arrive on the scene to restore order, but they were only showing up as a formality, rather than actually doing anything useful. "Do the authorities not care that this is happening?" Chen Ping'an asked. Cui Chan smiled as he replied, "They either don't care, or they're too scared to do anything, and there are even some officials who are dying for the opportunity to suck up to these cultivators." Chen Ping'an turned to Li Baoping and Li Huai, then said in a quiet voice, "Let's keep going." Cui Chan didn't get back into his carriage. Instead, he slowly walked along between Chen Ping'an's group and the horse-drawn carriage. His sleeves were billowing out around him in a majestic manner, making him resemble an elegant deity. As the group drew closer to the city god temple, they discovered that most of the people on the streets were worshippers who had come to offer incense in the temple. There were many stalls on either side of the street, selling all types of wares such as food and children's toys. Chen Ping'an bought Li Baoping and Li Huai a tonghulu each, and the two children immediately began to compare whose tonghulu was bigger. As it turned out, Li Huai was the luckier of the two children, and there were a total of 6 hawthorn berries on his stick, and overall, he had beaten Li Baoping 4 times. After claiming his victory over Li Baoping, Li Huai began to rush in circles around Chen Ping'an and Lin Shuyi while holding his tonghulu high above his head. Meanwhile, Li Baoping was eating her tonghulu in silence, and she suddenly extended a leg forward in a sneaky fashion. Li Huai was caught completely off guard and tripped over her leg, falling face first onto the ground, while his tonghulu fell out of his hand and rolled away into the distance. Thankfully, his bamboo bookcase was strapped quite securely to his back, so it didn't fall off, but that was no consolation to Li Huai, and he began bawling his eyes out as he sat on the ground. Li Baoping raised her head, feigning an oblivious expression as she looked around in an innocent manner. Chen Ping'an was both exasperated and amused by her actions, and he gave her a firm flick on the forehead, then helped Li Huai to his feet before buying the distraught boy another Donghua. Li Huai's tears immediately gave way to a wide smile, and he accepted the clean Donghua, then picked up the dirty Donghua from the ground, holding one in each hand. This time he made sure to stay far away from Li Baoping as he waved his Donghua around in a gloating fashion. Li Baoping rolled her eyes at him as she scoffed. "You're so immature." What was rather interesting was that no matter what Li Baoping did to Li Huai, he had never held a grudge against her. In fact, he had never even gotten angry at her, and at the very most, he would only feel saddened or indignant. This was something that Chen Ping'an and Lin Shui had never been able to understand, and Lin Shui could only explain that certain things were simply meant to be, and it seemed that Li Huai was simply destined to suffer in silence at Li Baoping's hands. Chui Chan had separated himself from the group quite a while ago, stopping on his own in front of a stall selling miscellaneous goods. Yulu stopped the carriage to wait for him, but Chui Chan didn't even raise his head as he waved a hand at Yulu, indicating for him to follow Chen Ping'an and the others. Meanwhile, he began to examine the goods being sold, but in the end, nothing caught his eye, and he prepared to depart. Throughout this entire process, he hadn't uttered a single word. The owner of the stall was a lazy-looking young man, and whenever there had been customers passing by his stall on the way to the temple, he had largely ignored their price inquiries, so business was far from booming. In his eyes, Chui Chan's attire and demeanor indicated that he was from a wealthy clan in the city, and the lackadaisical look on his face immediately faded at the sight of Chui Chan's lack of interest in his wares. He hurriedly rose to his feet from his stool, putting on a fawning expression as he introduced that the dozen or so items being sold had all been passed down for generations in his family, and that they were at least 200 to 300 years old. He was only selling them now as his family had encountered a crisis and was in urgent need of money. Otherwise, he would have sooner died than put these cherished treasures up for sale. It was clear from the young man's appearance that had ruined his body through excessive alcohol consumption and sexual activity, and no matter how he advertised his wares to Chui Chan, the latter remained completely silent. Thus, the young man could sit back down onto his stool in a defeated manner. Any of the young masters of affluent clans in the city could crush him like an ant, so he certainly didn't dare to try and force Chui Chan to purchase his wares. It was said that those affluent clans were visited by immortals virtually every year, and whenever such a visit took place, the visiting immortals would all be ceremoniously welcomed, producing scenes that were even more lively and bustling than festival celebrations. The fireworks set off on those occasions were so loud that they shook the very heavens, and those clans wanted nothing more than to tell the entire city that they had been blessed with a visit from esteemed immortals. "I'll take everything on this table for 10 taels of silver. Will that be enough?" Chui Chan suddenly asked. The young man shook his head vigorously as he replied with a sullen expression, "Forgive me for turning down your offer, esteemed young master, but all of these items that I'm selling really are treasures that have been passed down for generations in my family. There are clear records on our genealogy tree that one of my ancestors once served as the imperial teacher of the later Shu nation's auspicious dynasty. Surely it's not too much to ask for 70 or 80 taels of silver, for even just a single one of these things." The young man's face had become flushed red as he picked up a colored glass figure that was around half an inch in length. Unfortunately, the figure was dull and devoid of luster, and it certainly didn't look like a prized artifact. The young stall owner leaned forward slightly, then carefully handed the glass figure to Chui Chan as he said, "Take a good look at this, esteemed young master. If you have good eyesight, you'll even be able to see the eyebrows and the creases on the robes of the figure. The amount of detail on this thing is astounding. Even if the material isn't of the highest quality, this is still an extremely rare glass figure, so surely it wouldn't be too much to ask for 3 or 4 taels of silver for it. If we factor in all of the other treasures here, 10 taels of silver is simply far too low a price for me to accept. Please consider raising the price out of the boundless generosity of your kind heart, esteemed young master." Chui Chan paused momentarily for contemplation, then offered, "How about 11 taels of silver then?" The The young man was so exasperated that he almost passed out, and he was rooted to the spot as he stared at Cui Chan in a dazed manner before heaving a resigned sigh. "Please don't play with me like this, esteemed young master." Cui Chan burst into laughter, then asked, "Do you recognize official silver?" The young man faltered slightly upon hearing this, then nodded with a wry smile as he replied, "Of course. Our clan was quite affluent during my father's generation, and around a dozen of the shops on the street neighboring the city god temple once belonged to our clan." Cui Chan pulled out a silver ingot before setting it down onto the table as he declared, "Here are 20 taels of the Greatly Empire's official silver, converted into the inferior silver used in your Yellow Court nation. This should be equivalent to at least 25 taels of silver. Will that be enough for this table of trash?" The young man had snuck all of these items out to sell in secret, and he had set out to sell them for 20 taels of silver, so he immediately accepted the offer with a gleeful expression, hurriedly picking up the ingot of silver before clutching it tightly in his hand. He carefully examined the silver ingot for a moment, then gently scratched it with his fingernail, and he determined that this really was a silver ingot of exceptional quality. He was terrified that Cui Chan would change his mind, so he quickly stowed the silver ingot away, then grabbed onto the corners of the tablecloth before lifting them up and tying the corners together to form a parcel. All of the items inside were clattering together as he did so, and after tying up the corners of the tablecloth, the young man pushed the parcel toward Cui Chan with an ecstatic smile as he declared, "It's all yours, esteemed young master." Cui Chan picked up the parcel as he jibed, "If you've sold me counterfeit wares, then I'm going to hunt you down and make you eat these things one by one." The young man put on a fawning smile as he assured, "I'm renowned around these parts for my honesty and integrity, and I've never swindled anyone, so you can rest assured, esteemed young master. This was definitely a favorable deal for you." Cui Chan carried the parcel of items in one hand as he sped up in his footsteps to catch up to Chan Ping'an and the others. As he drew close to the horse-drawn carriage, he casually tossed the parcel to Xie Xie, then arrived by Chan Ping'an's side as he pointed at the eye-catching roof of the city god temple up ahead and introduced, "This is the largest city god pavilion in Yellow Court Nation, and it's said during the final years of the later Shu nation's existence, this temple had jurisdiction over the city gods of several states, so the green glazed tiles on the roof are of an extremely high quality. They definitely would dare to put such precious tiles onto the roof of the average city god temple. This wasn't the original site of the temple, and it was only moved here after the Han clan took over the nation and ushered in a new dynasty. The original site of this city god temple was quite a good place with an old well nearby. That well was a spirit spring, and it's since been turned into an inn by a sect of Yellow Court Nation. The inn caters exclusively to cultivators, officials of the imperial court, and wealthy individuals, and the spiritual energy emanating from the spirit spring is very conducive to cultivation, making it an extremely rare and exceptional place in the mortal world." "Is it expensive to stay there?" Chan Ping'an asked. Cui Chan considered the question for a moment, then replied, "In your eyes, it would be ridiculously expensive." Chan Ping'an took a glance at Lin Shuyi, who was looking at the decorative beasts on the roof of the city god temple, then asked in a quiet voice, "How expensive is it?" Cui Chan smiled as he replied, "It would cost at least 100 taels of silver per person per night, and if you want to stay in the room closest to the well, then the price would more than double." As the Greatly Empire's imperial preceptor, Cui Chan once controlled a part of the Empire's intelligence system, and his area of focus was specifically on the immortal powers in the Greatly Empire and in the surrounding nations. It was through those intelligence sources that he had learned about the history of this prefectural city, including the history of this city god temple. As for why he was familiar with the exact prices charged by the inn, that was a piece of information that he had learned just for something to do in his free time, and perhaps it would have served as an interesting topic of conversation whenever he was summoned to see the emperor. Chan Ping'an lowered his voice as he asked, "If I had a gold essence copper coin on me right now, how much silver would I be able to exchange it for?" Cui Chan remained silent as he pointed at the city god temple, which was drawing closer and closer. "What's that supposed to mean?" Chan Ping'an asked with a perplexed expression. "I'm saying that you'll be able to exchange it for a mountain of silver the size of this temple," Cui Chan explained with a smile. Chan Ping'an's mouth gaped open slightly as he turned to the huge city god temple, and unconsciously adjusted the belongings on his back. Only now was he aware that he was carrying a mountain of silver on his back, and he was suddenly struggling under its weight. Cui Chan noticed this subtle gesture, but gave no reaction. After hesitating for a long while, Chan Ping'an stopped in his tracks right before he stepped into the city god temple, then asked, Cui Dongshan, can I borrow some silver from you? Cui Chan seemed to have been waiting for Chan Ping'an to make this request, and he tucked his hands into his sleeves as he smiled and nodded in response. Of course you can. You can treat me as a walking treasure trove of resources. If you want money, then I have money. If you want treasures, then I have treasures. I have everything that you could ever think of, so you're limited only by your imagination. Chan Ping'an took a moment to make up his mind, then said, in that case, we'll stay in this inn for tonight. Regardless of how long we stay here, I'll get you to take care of all of the costs for now. After we leave the inn, give me a total sum, and you can set the interest rate as you see fit. Once we return to Dragon Spring County, I'll repay you in both principal and interest. Is that all right? Cui Chan extended a hand out of his sleeve and waved it as he replied, don't worry about interest, all you have to do is repay the principal sum. Right at this moment, Li Huai suddenly squatted down with half a tonghulu still held in his hand, and his eyes widened as he stared at Cui Chan's boots. As it turned out, there was a pristine white little ant standing on Cui Chan's boot, and the ant's original intention was to climb up Cui Chan's boot and onto his robes, but as soon as it fell under Li Huai's scrutiny, it immediately stopped moving. Li Huai was very much intrigued by the sight of the little ant, and he reached out a hand to try and grab it. The little ant was greatly startled to see this, and it didn't dare to play dead any longer as it immediately jumped up in an agile manner. It hooked onto the fine material of Cui Chan's robes with its front legs, then rushed quickly up to Cui Chan's waist, and with one final leap, it latched onto the underside of Cui Chan's sleeve, where it dangled while swinging slightly from side to side. Cui Chan's expression remained unchanged as he caught the ant between two of the fingers on his right hand, then gently held it in his palm before thrusting it into his left sleeve. In an astonishing turn of events, the ant melted away like snow and ice in Cui Chan's palm, instantly transforming into a silver ingot, but the silver ingot was still squirming and moving incessantly. After stowing the moving silver ingot up his sleeve, Cui Chan looked around to find that Yu Lu and Xia Xia were displaying no reaction to the miraculous feat that he had just performed, but Chan Ping'an and his group of little hillbillies from Jewel's small world were astonished by what they had just seen. Cui Chan clearly didn't want to offer an explanation to Chan Ping'an and the others, and he turned to Yu Lu as he said, get some incense with Xia Xia, we'll be using them once we enter the city god temple. Ideally, get an incense tube while you're at it. Of course, make sure to get a cheap and simple one. Otherwise, I'm not going to pay for it. Yu Lu and Xia Xia did as they were told, departing to secure some incense sticks, while Chan Ping'an suddenly said, Cui Dongshan, that silver ingot was the money that you used to buy that parcel of items, right? How has it turned into an ant and come back to you? An innocent look appeared on Cui Chan's face as he replied, I already paid for the items and he agreed to the price, but the silver ingot insisted on coming back to me on its own. I feel really bad about this as well. Li Huai was crouched down on the ground, and an envious look appeared on his face as he mused, what a fantastic little creature that is. If I had a silver ingot like that, I'd be able to go anywhere I please. Cui Chan looked down at Li Huai with a smile as he asked, you like it? Do you want it? That little thing is called a bug silver, and it can't do anything remarkable aside from pose as a silver ingot. No one knows how these creatures came into existence, but even in the large vaults of many empires, there's no guarantee that a bug silver would appear even over the course of a century. Furthermore, even if they do appear, they're usually not very big, and they can only transform into pieces of scrap silver. It's extremely rare to see one as big as the one up my sleeve right now, and that's why I like to bring it with me everywhere I go. Furthermore, it's impervious to fire and water, and even if tremendous force is exerted upon it, it'll remain completely unharmed. You can even slice it up into dozens of pieces, but all you have to do is gather all of the pieces back together in one pile, and it'll quickly return to its original form. Do you want it? If you do, I can give it to you. Li Huai rose to his feet as he replied with a serious expression, I have only one sister. Her name is Li Lu, and at the moment, she's still Aoyang's wife. Chui Chan was accustomed to Li Huai's way of speech and he replied, "Would you like the bug silver for free? I'm not interested in your sister. If I use it to pay for food and treat Chen Ping'an and the others to delicious meals, will it be able to come back on its own every single time?" Li Huai asked. Chui Chan nodded with a smile, and the silver ingot dropped out of his sleeve before he handed it to Li Huai. Li Huai was just about to accept the silver ingot when a hesitant look appeared on his face, and he turned to look at Chen Ping'an, who said, "If we're going to eat, then we have to pay for our meals. We can't use tricks to get out of paying for food. I don't care what Chui Dongshan does, but don't forget that you are a disciple of Mr. Qi." Li Huai immediately clasped his hands behind him, pressing them tightly against his own backside as he shook his head at Chui Chan and sighed. "You can keep it." However, Chen Ping'an then continued, "I wasn't finished, Li Huai. You are Mr. Qi's disciple, but you can still accept the bug silver. This is a gift from Chui Dongshan to you, so you should accept it. As for how you use it in the future, we'll establish some rules when the time comes." Li Huai's eyes immediately lit up as he grabbed the silver ingot out of Chui Chan's hand. He was just about to put the silver ingot in his chest pocket when a thought occurred to him, and he quickly turned around so that his back was facing everyone, then opened his bookcase and tossed the silver ingot inside. Chui Chan withdrew his hand with a resigned expression as he mused, "I've always been the swindler, but it appears that I've been swindled myself here." Shortly thereafter, Yu Lu returned with an intricately crafted boxwood incense tube that was filled with incense sticks, enough for everyone to make multiple temple visits. Aside from Xie Xie, who had to stay behind to keep an eye on the horse-drawn carriage, everyone else made their way into the city god temple, and after offering their incense to the city god, they saw a pair of couplets in the main hall. One takes nothing with them in death, and they can only pray for the welfare of their descendants in the underworld. One may be denounced for millennia to come in the world of the living, but they'll realize none of that matters on the other side. The city god statue was situated on a tall pedestal at the center, while on either side of it down below were its subordinates, presenting quite a formidable lineup to behold, with just the assortment of generals alone consisting of a total of 8 statues. These were the supervisors of the 8 divisions, which included the likes of the Enyang Division and the Quick Report Division. Chui Chan informed them that this was the extent of the number of divisions, even in the city god temples of the highest caliber on Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, but the largest city god temple in the world had as many as 24 divisions, including even a register examination division, a disease expulsion division, and an academic policy division. Essentially, it rivaled the imperial court of a small empire. Lin Shui was very intrigued by all of this, while Li Baoping wasn't displaying much interest, and Li Huai was the most cowardly one of the 3, so he only dared to remain tightly by Chen Ping'an's side. After seeing the renowned wall murals of the 18 abysses of punishment in the temple, everyone felt like this visit to the temple was very much worth the trip. After that, they made their way out of the main hall and arrived in the rear hall, which resembled a room in a county office where cases were judged. The city god was seated behind the desk with a pair of judges standing on either side of him, but there was only half a couplet outside the hall, which read, "Sincerity is the key, there is no need to kowtow, get out of my sight," while the second half of the couplet was missing. Li Baoping finally found something that had caught her interest, and she began to try and complete the couplet, but no matter what she came up with, she remained dissatisfied, and her brows were tightly furrowed as she continued to persevere, not willing to give up. Chui Chan and Yu Lu were also standing beneath the incomplete couplet, while Chen Ping'an, Lin Shui, and Li Huai were looking into the hall from the entrance. There were a series of statues inside the hall, one of which was kowtowing against the ground, another one was wearing shackles, and a third one was hanging their head while kneeling to the city god. An azure-robed elderly man who was only his own spotted the eye-catching bamboo bookcase on Li Baoping's back, and a warm smile appeared on his face as he approached Chui Chan, then also raised his head to look up at the incomplete couplet as he said, "I can see that you're a group of little scholars. Have any of you thought of a good second line to complete the couplet?" Chui Chan ignored the old man, pretending not to have heard him, while Li Baoping genuinely didn't hear him, as she would always invest her full attention into something that caught her interest. Yu Lu was the only one to offer a response, and he smiled as he replied, "I've thought of a few, but I'm not happy with any of them. They're far too terrible to be heard, so I won't share any of them with you." The old man burst into laughter, and he pointed at the incomplete couplet as he said, "With regard to this couplet, there's an unspoken rule in the city, which is that anyone, regardless of whether they be human, spirit, ghost, or monster, anyone who can come up with a second line that satisfies everyone will become an esteemed guest of the old city god." "What qualifies as a second line that satisfies everyone?" Yu Lu asked with a puzzled expression. "Look within yourself for the answer," Cui Chan replied in a lackadaisical manner. Li Baoping just so happened to be mulling over a similar question, but she had encountered a mental block that she was unable to bypass. Upon hearing Cui Chan's answer to Yu Lu's question, she reflexively added, "In the peaceful night, when the mind is clear and sharp, look within yourself, and the answer will arise." The old man gave a nod of approval. Even though Li Baoping was ultimately unable to think of a suitable second line, the old man still insisted on accompanying them out of the city god temple, then waved farewell to everyone with a benevolent smile on his face as he stood inside the temple. After leaving the ancient city god temple, Chan Ping'an began to ask the people on the streets for the location of the inn mentioned by Cui Chan, but none of them were aware of such a place. It seemed that the inn didn't even exist in this city, so Chan Ping'an could only turn to Cui Chan. Cui Chan smiled as he said, "How about we find some other place to stay then? I only heard about the inn from someone else, so the information may not be accurate. If that inn doesn't exist, then you won't have to borrow money from me." Chan Ping'an turned to look at Lin Shuyi, who looked back at him with a lost expression, and Chan Ping'an decided to persist as he said, "You guys can explore the market, I'll keep asking around." With that, Chan Ping'an rushed forward on his own, asking one passerby after another if they had heard of the inn mentioned by Cui Chan. Meanwhile, Cui Chan made his way back toward the horse-drawn carriage with a displeased look in his eyes. In his eyes, even though Chan Ping'an had a priceless gold essence copper coin in his possession, it was still extremely expensive to stay at the inn, and ultimately, it would only benefit someone else, so he couldn't understand why Chan Ping'an was making such a diligent effort. While bending down to lift the curtain of the carriage, Cui Chan took a glance at the completely oblivious Lin Shuyi, and a hint of envy suddenly appeared in his eyes. In the end, Chan Ping'an was only able to find out the former site of the city god temple, but no one had heard of the inn that Cui Chan had mentioned. This prefectural city was a major city in the northern region of Yellow Court Nation, and in order to get to the city god temple's former site, they had to travel across virtually half of the entire city. By the time everyone arrived at their destination, it was already close to dusk, and they were only greeted by the tall red wall. After that, it took them a very long time before they finally found an alley with an obscure entrance, one that was barely just wide enough for the two horse-drawn carriages to fit through. The deeper one ventured into the alley, the more one felt like they were entering another world. Faint wisps of mist were occasionally rising up from the gaps between the bricks underfoot, and those wisps of mist would drift toward the tall walls on either side of the alley, where they would then slowly flow along the walls amid the faint sound of flowing water. Cui Chan could tell that Chan Ping'an and the others were feeling quite apprehensive, so he explained, "This alley is called the Flowing Cloud Water Alley, and it's one of the signature attractions of this inn. Once we enter through the front gate of the manor, we should be able to see a bright moon shadow wall. There are spirits of unknown origins residing in the shadow wall, and they possess no set form. Their form roughly corresponds with the state of the moon, so the lunar cycle is entirely reflected on the wall. However, the most precious shadow wall here is the combined sun-moon wall. If some constellations could be added to the wall, then it would be something that even the immortal sex would be desperately fighting over." At the end of the alley was a tall gate with a pair of imposing door gods engraved onto its surface. The door gods were even taller and more intimidating than a pair of strong young men, and they were both clad in golden armor, presenting a formidable sight to behold. One of them was riding a tiger steed while wielding a sword, while the other was riding atop a flood dragon with a saber held aloft in his hand. The two door gods were glowering into the alley with furious expressions, and due to the fact that they were carved out of wood rather than crafted from paper, as ordinary door gods were, they struck the beholder with an even more suffocating sense of pressure. Li Huai gulped nervously at the sight of the door gods, and he much preferred the freedom of camping out in the wilderness. The gate slowly swung open, and a beautiful woman with a pair of peach blossom eyes emerged, swinging her hips from side to side as she strode over the doorstep in an elegant manner. There were 2 girls behind her with their hair arranged into a pair of ring buns, and each of them had a long sword in an azure scabbard strapped to their waist. Instead of accompanying the woman as she approached Chen Ping'an's group, the 2 girls remained at the entrance. The woman extended a graceful curtsy as she said, "My name is Lu Zhuhou, Jia is in Emperor Jiaqing, and Hui is in flowers. My name is not worthy of note, you can just call me Zhuhou. May I ask if you would like to stay at our autumn read-in? Have you made a reservation in advance?" While the woman was speaking, her gaze was fixed firmly on Cui Chan, who was by far the most well-dressed of the group. However, Cui Chan didn't reciprocate her warm reception, acting in a very rude manner. The 2 of them looked at one another, and even though the woman was rather displeased, the smile on her face remained unchanged. However, the 2 girls standing at the entrance were clearly quite angry to see this. No one in the entire city dared to be so disrespectful to their mistress. Even if the esteemed prefectural governor were to run into the woman during an outing or while offering incense to the temples, he would be sure to treat her with a great deal of respect, referring to her as Mistress Lu, and if he had something to ask of her or required the autumn read-in to help him accommodate an esteemed guest, he would refer to her respectfully as Immortal Lu. The woman took a quick glance at the cold and aloof Lin Shuyi out of the corner of her eye, but she didn't discover anything amiss, so she turned her gaze back to Cui Chan before asking in a gentle voice, "Are you perhaps unhappy with my service or displeased with our autumn read-in? Perhaps you're disappointed and think that our inn isn't what it was made out to be." Cui Chan was running out of patience, and he pointed at Chen Ping'an as he said, "You're speaking to the wrong person. He's the one who calls the shots and holds all the money in our group." The woman was quite taken aback to hear this, and she hurriedly extended a curtsy toward Chen Ping'an as an apology. Before she had a chance to say anything, Chen Ping'an took a glance at the gates, then withdrew his gaze and took a deep breath, seemingly having just made up his mind. "We have quite a few people here, will there be enough rooms for us?" The woman smiled as she replied, "Of course. Our city's triennial water god temple worship ceremony is coming up soon, and immortals have come from far and wide to attend the ceremony, so our autumn read-in is a bit busier than usual, but even so, we would be honored to accommodate esteemed guests such as yourselves. Even if I have to vacate the courtyard that I'm living in and temporarily move to another inn, I definitely wouldn't dare to turn you away." In the end, Chen Ping'an requested a large courtyard by the name of Clear Dew, and it was the courtyard that was situated closest to the old well where the city god temple used to be, making it the premier courtyard of the autumn read-in. The reason why it had been vacant up to this point was that it was too expensive to stay in. The price was 2,000 taels of silver per day, regardless of how many people were staying in the courtyard at once. There was no lack of cultivators among the autumn read-in's patrons, but when it came to cultivation, unless one came from a wealthy clan, or had affluent backers, or had methods through which they could secure large sums of income themselves, one generally had to be extremely frugal and careful with their spending. Many mortals had the impression that all cultivators were extremely wealthy, but in reality, that was far from the truth. The old well in the autumn read-in was indeed the spring that was the source of the spiritual energy in the area, but for a cultivator, spending 2,000 taels of silver per day to stay there was definitely not a worthwhile investment. Hence, this courtyard was mostly reserved for wealthy and powerful figures, more so as a sign of status rather than for its cultivation benefits. Mistress Lu personally led Chen Ping'an's group through a series of corridors before arriving in a peaceful courtyard. There were a bunch of banana trees growing in a corner of the courtyard, as well as a stone water vat that was around half as tall as a grown person. Inside the vat was a school of koi fish of different colors, and there were lotus flowers floating on the surface of the water, some of which had only just begun to bloom. Mistress Lu pointed at a copper bell on a stone table, and she smiled as she said, "If you need anything, just shake the bell, and some servants will immediately arrive to do your bidding. Also, if you exit the courtyard through the back door and go northward around 30 or so steps, you'll be able to see a pavilion by the name of the Boundary Pavilion. There are 3 futons placed in the pavilion, and cultivators can sit in the pavilion to absorb the spiritual energy in the area. Unfortunately, the well is not open to the general public. I hope you may understand." Chen Ping'an nodded in response. "All right, we'll be sure not to go past the Boundary Pavilion to the old well." Mistress Lu's naturally seductive peach blossom eyes narrowed slightly as she put on a genuine smile and said, "Your understanding is very much appreciated. "Mistress Lu, isn't there supposed to be a shadow wall over at the gate?" Li Baoping asked with a curious expression. Mistress Lu heaved a faint sigh upon hearing this question, and she clearly didn't want to go into detail about the matter, so she replied in an ambiguous manner, "A minor incident took place earlier, causing the shadow wall to lose its ability to reflect the lunar cycle, so we removed it." The Clear Du courtyard contained 4 rooms, with 3 of the rooms being occupied by Li Baoping and Xie Xie, Li Huai and Chan Ping'an, and Cui Chan and Yu Lu, while the final room was reserved for Lin Shuyi, who was already a cultivator. Upon entering this place, Lin Shuyi was struck by a refreshing sensation. It was like having to travel through a heavy storm, with the ground being reduced to mud, forcing one to pull their feet out of the mud with every single step that they took, only for the rain to suddenly recede. And not only did the road dry out, the traveler had also changed into a set of clean clothes. The contrast was naturally akin to night and day, with the traveler feeling as if they had been reborn anew, and that was the exact same feeling that Lin Shuyi was experiencing. At the same time, he was feeling rather perplexed about why there was such a fantastic cultivation location concealed in such an obscure location in the town. On the way to the Clear Du courtyard, they didn't encounter any other guests staying at the inn. According to Mistress Lu, this was a rather busy period for the autumn read-in, but even so, it was completely different from the lively and bustling inns that they had previously stayed in along their journey. Following Mistress Lu's departure, Chan Ping'an set his basket down in the room, then pulled an ebony wood box out of the basket. Inside the box were 4 jade hairpins of the most simplistic of designs placed next to one another. 2 of the hairpins were crafted from mutton fat jade, and they were extremely smooth and delicate. The other 2 hairpins were crafted from green jade and black jade, respectively, and those 4 hairpins, along with the box that they were housed in, had cost Chan Ping'an 100 taels of silver. On the way to the autumn read-in, they had passed by a jade shop. Chan Ping'an had originally only intended to go in and take a look to broaden his horizons, but those 4 hairpins had caught his eye, sitting peacefully in the open wooden box, presenting a pleasant sight to behold. Upon hearing the astonishing price of 100 taels of silver from the shopkeeper, Chan Ping'an had immediately decided against buying the hairpins, but Cui Chan had encouraged him to change his mind on several occasions. In the end, he blatantly declared that if Chan Ping'an wasn't going to purchase the hairpins, then he was going to do so. Ultimately, Chan Ping'an decided to heed Cui Chan's advice, and just like the money spent on accommodation at the inn, that was going to be owed to Cui Chan until they returned to Dragon Tail County. Thus, the first sum of money that Chan Ping'an owed Cui Chan turned out to be 100 taels of silver, which wasn't a lot, but it definitely wasn't an insignificant sum either. The shopkeeper gifted Chan Ping'an a small carving knife used by jade workers, and he also explained to Chan Ping'an the different levels of hardness of the 3 types of jade, thereby requiring different amounts of force to be exerted when engraving inscriptions upon them, and Chan Ping'an had carefully committed everything to memory. While on the boat on the embroidered flower river, the jade hairpin gifted to him by Qi Jingchun had gone missing, and at the time, he had declared to Li Baoping that if the opportunity ever arose in the future, he would buy a hairpin and inscribe those 8 characters onto it himself. He had followed through on that promise, except what was supposed to have been 1 hairpin had turned into 4. Li Huai set his little bookcase down at the foot of the wall, then flopped down onto the bed on his back as he sighed with a blissful expression. This is truly an abode that's meant for immortals. It's too bad my parents and my sister aren't fortunate enough to experience this. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to him, and he hurriedly sprang up from the bed before rushing to his bookcase and rummaging through its contents. Before long, he had pulled everything out of the bookcase, including his wooden dolls and clay figures, following which he stuck his head into the empty bookcase. He then abruptly turned to Chan Ping'an and complained in an indignant manner. "I knew it. That silver ingot is gone. Cui Dongshan must have taken it. What do I do, Chan Ping'an? Can I go and ask for it back from him?" Meanwhile, Chan Ping'an was seated in front of the table with the wooden box and the carving knife placed in front of him, and he was inspecting the items with a serious look on his face. Upon hearing Li Huai's complaints, Chan Ping'an turned to him with a smile and replied, "That bug silver belongs to you now, so if it really is in Cui Dongshan's possession right now, then of course you can ask for it back." Li Huai hurriedly rushed out of the room upon hearing this as he declared, "I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Make sure to be polite and respectful." Chen Ping'an said. Chen Ping'an got up to close the door, then returned to the table and picked up the intricate jade carving knife between two of his fingers, carefully feeling its weight and balance. As for what he was going to inscribe onto his hairpin, that was very simple. It was going to be the same phrase as the one engraved onto the hairpin that he had lost. As gentle and amiable as jade should a virtuous person be. As for the other 3 jade hairpins, he was planning to give them to the 3 children as a parting gift once they arrived at Mountain Cliff Academy, and he was going to engrave the phrases Baoping, Shuyi, and Huayin onto them respectively. Even after extensively racking his brains, these were the only things that Chen Ping'an could think of to inscribe onto the 3 hairpins. The phrases weren't particularly elegant or meaningful, but he definitely couldn't go wrong with them either. All of a sudden, the door of his room was pushed open by Lin Shuyi, who was standing in the doorway with a furious expression as he yelled, "Chen Ping'an, have you gone insane? You spent 2,000 taels of silver just to stay here for a night." Chen Ping'an turned around with a dazed expression to face the furious boy, and he discovered that Cui Chan was standing next to Lin Shuyi with an extremely punch-worthy grin on his face. Lin Shuyi was so furious that his lips were trembling, and he stabbed a finger at Chen Ping'an as he continued, "Do you know how much 2,000 taels of silver is worth? Are you the son of the prefectural overseer, or are you a member of the imperial family?" Chen Ping'an's brows furrowed slightly in response to Lin Shuyi's accusatory words, and he gently set down his carving knife before rising to his feet. He was just about to say something, but Lin Shuyi had already departed. Meanwhile, Li Huai snuck into the room with the silver ingot clutched in his hand. He didn't dare to get involved in this at all, and his face was a little pale from fear as he sat down onto the edge of the bed. Chen Ping'an took a glance at Cui Chan, then returned to his chair. As the perpetrator who had stirred up this conflict, Cui Chan leaned against the doorframe as he jibed. "It's a terrible feeling having your good intentions thrown back in your face, right?" Chen Ping'an paid no heed to him. Cui Chan was silent for a moment, then made his way into the room before sitting down at the table across from Chen Ping'an. He rested his chin on one hand as he looked at Chen Ping'an with a smile and continued, "We both know that you borrowed money from me to stay here, but do you think that Lin Shuyi thinks that you spent the entire group's joint funds to stay here? You spent the money for the sake of his cultivation, but Lin Shuyi has already developed a concept of money from a young age, so perhaps after weighing up the pros and cons, he still felt like this was not a good deal, and maybe that's why he got mad at you. I think these are all possibilities." Chen Ping'an's expression remained unchanged. "You must think that I enjoy stirring the pot, right?" Cui Chan asked with a wide grin. "If you think that, then you're wrong. Let me give you an analogy here. Earlier today, I used a silver ingot to purchase a whole bundle of trash. However, whenever that bug silver falls into the hands of a stranger, it would find an opportunity to transform into something like an ant or a dragonfly in return to me. Because of that, you must feel like I swindled that man and screwed him over, right? Once again, you couldn't be more wrong. That man is nothing more than a desperate gambling addict. Someone who takes everything for granted and doesn't appreciate what he has. If I had given him actual silver to fund his gambling addiction, then I would really be screwing him over, and perhaps he'll end up dead in a few days. Now that he doesn't have any silver to gamble with, he'll have no choice but to steal stuff out of his household to sell again, and that would allow him to live for a few more days. Ever since you left the carriage and introduced the city god temple to me, then mentioned this autumn read-in apparently by chance, you've been setting a trap for me, right?" Chen Ping'an asked. "I just don't understand why you would do something like this. You're hurting others with no benefit to yourself, so what's the point?" Cui Chan cocked his head to the side as he tapped two of his fingers against the table in succession and replied, "There was once someone who was slightly older than you. He had a seal that had the phrase, 'The world welcomes spring,' inscribed upon it." Cui Chan's voice trailed off here, and he seemed to have fallen into deep thought. "So?" Chen Ping'an asked. Cui Chan returned to his senses, then massaged his own glabella. As he thought of all of the strange happenings that had taken place along their journey, he was becoming more and more convinced of one thing, which was that the seal that Qi Jingchun had given Zhao Yao was one that harbored extremely important meaning. Unfortunately, as soon as Zhao Yao was confronted by Cui Chan, he immediately chose to hand over the seal. Regardless of his reason for doing so, whether it be to protect himself or his family, The fact that he had chosen to hand over the seal meant that whatever was harbored within the seal naturally returned to heaven and earth, so it was no longer that spring had lingered for so long this year. However, Cui Chan didn't think that things were this simple. Regardless of whether Qi Jingchun had some other tricks up his sleeve, the old scholar had tied his fate together with Chan Pingin's. As a result, he was forced to accompany Chan Pingin on his journey, and his future had become extremely uncertain, but he still wasn't willing to just give up and surrender all hope. Instead, his desire for victory was burning more fiercely than it ever had, and he wanted to guide Chan Pingin step by step onto his path of sunshine and roses, rather than be led down the dark and decrepit alley that Chan Pingin walked. It was as if the two of them were engaging in a tug of war, but as opposed to a contest of physical strength, this was a battle of mental fortitude. The thought of competing against Chan Pingin in a contest of mental fortitude gradually put Cui Chan in a better and better mood. He was once a Tier 12 cultivator and a Go Grandmaster who was vastly renowned across the Middle-earth Divine Continent, so there was no way that he would lose to a child. Meanwhile, Chan Pingin was paying no further heed to Cui Chan as he had already begun carving the first character onto his jade hairpin. As the night grew darker, a burst of pleasant clip-clopping from horse hooves trotting along the ground rang out from the flowing cloud-water valley outside the gates of the Autumn Reed Inn. Mistress Lu was standing outside the entrance by herself with a pair of tiger-shaped gold accessories hanging from her waist. A horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of the gates, and a middle-aged man in a scholarly robe emerged from within. The man gave off a natural sense of authority, and he seemed to be a man who was well-versed in both books and the martial arts. However, he was looking quite weary at this moment, and a smile appeared on his face at the sight of Mistress Lu as he said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. Let's go inside." Mistress Lu turned around to lead the way into the inn with an indifferent expression. The man glanced at the tiger amulets hanging from her waist, and his brows furrowed slightly as he asked, "Do you really need to be that cautious around me?" A cold smile appeared on Mistress Lu's face as she replied, "I'm just a woman who runs a small inn. I can't compare with the mighty prefectural office. Just a couple of days ago, our signature shadow wall was removed, and all I could do was suffer in silence. To add further insult to injury, the perpetrator has brought a bunch of disciples and grand-disciples to stay at my inn, and once again, all I can do is put on a smile and tend to the needs of those revered immortals. It's all thanks to your exceptional governance over the prefecture that I've been blessed with the honor of serving these esteemed immortals." "That's enough, Zhuhou," the man said in a stern voice. "I know that you're angry about this situation, but I'm not in a much better situation than you are. In order to prepare for the Water God Temple worship ceremony, I've been running around like a headless chicken ever since dawn, and my throat feels like it's on fire. I've come here to rest for a moment at your inn rather than return directly to the prefectural office because I wanted some peace and quiet, not to hear you ramble and complain." Mistress Lu turned to the man with a displeased look in her eyes, but as a woman who could see the big picture, she ultimately suppressed her emotions and changed the subject as she said, "You've been toiling away for this ceremony for the past half year, and it's definitely an ostentatious occasion. The old prefectural governor isn't able to make it in person due to health reasons, but he sent his most trusted subordinate to attend the ceremony, and that's more than sufficient as a gesture of support. On top of that, all of those renowned scholars, monks, and anchorites will be in attendance to offer their support, and that's not even to mention everything that our prefecture has pledged to this event. If the funding provided by our prefecture in private were to be taken elsewhere, surely it would be enough to support a pair of river gods." "That is indeed true," the man replied with a nod. "Has the cold food great river god finally taken a liking to you this time?" Mistress Lu asked in a quiet voice. "Has he agreed to help you lay claim to the position of governor?" The man clasped his hands behind his back, and he was clearly very familiar with the layout of the inn as he made his way into an elegant courtyard, then shook his head as he sighed. That itinerant cultivator truly showed up at a bad time. His actions have far-reaching consequences in all areas. He wanted to avenge those mortals who had been wrongfully killed, so he came to your Autumn Reed Inn and sought out that cultivator from the Spirit Charm sect, and he inflicted severe injuries upon the cultivator during their battle, destroying the foundation of your inn's shadow wall in the process. If that had been the extent of the incident, then I would have still been able to contain the situation. For example, I could report this matter to the imperial court and pin the blame solely on that itinerant cultivator to spare that cultivator from the spirit charm sect of all wrongdoing, thereby consoling the spirit charm sect, which has deep-rooted ties with our Yellow Court nation. However, at the same time, I would also allow that itinerant cultivator to slip away in secret. I would arrange a manhunt within our prefecture, but it would only be for show, and the true purpose of the manhunt would be to stall for time to allow him to get away. Seeing as he's an itinerant cultivator, he must be used to traveling across the land anyway, so I'm sure it wouldn't have been difficult for him to get away. A hint of vexation appeared in the man's eyes here, and he continued, but this just had to have happened right before the Cold Food River worship ceremony. Not only is this ceremony one that's receiving widespread attention and scrutiny, everyone knows that during the initial stage of the Great River God's rise to godhood, he was only able to gain a foothold with the assistance of one of the Spirit Charm sect's patriarchs. This relationship has been carefully maintained by the Spirit Charm sect for over 200 years, and during that, not only have they not troubled the Great River God over anything, they've sent people to visit the Great River God once a year, carrying lavish presents with them each time. With the exception of that period of time in which the sect was forced to endure a major crisis, that annual tradition has never been interrupted. So which side do you think the Great River God would be more inclined toward in the wake of this incident? The man was constantly pacing around the courtyard, unwilling to take a seat, and Mistress Lu handed him a cup of hot tea as she smiled and jibed. My esteemed prefectural overseer, can we please sit down to talk? If you keep pacing in circles like this, I'm going to get dizzy and pass out. The man finally sat down, and a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face as he said, I found out the location where that itinerant cultivator is hiding 3 days ago, and my initial thought was to stall for as long as possible. At the very least, I wanted to stall out the matter until after the ceremony, and if I can do that, perhaps he'll be able to escape alive. But today, the Cold Food Great River God revealed his godly body to me in the Water God Temple. And do you know what he said to me? Mistress Lu shook her head in response. She was naturally unable to glean the thoughts of a Great River God. As the manager of the Autumn Read Inn, the sect that Mistress Lu belonged to was actually quite comparable to the Spirit Charm sect. However, every renowned cultivating sect had its own set territory, and the Spirit Charm sect was the leader of the dozen or so cultivating sects in the 3 northern prefectures of Yellow Court Nation. Essentially, the cultivators of the Spirit Charm sect could do whatever they wanted in the northern region of Yellow Court Nation, but they held a great deal of respect and veneration for the Great River God that had been assigned by the Emperor himself. After all, Yellow Court Nation wasn't a mighty empire like the Great Li Empire or Great Sui Nation. Ever since the founding of Yellow Court Nation, it had always been one of Great Sui Nation's 12 subsidiary nations, and it had barely any mountain and river gods that had been assigned by the Emperor. To put it in blunt terms, even if Great Sui Nation were to lift all restrictions and allow the Hong clan of Yellow Court Nation to appoint as many mountain and river gods as they pleased, the limitations of the nation would have still prevented them from appointing many at all. Firstly, the nation's territory was limited, and secondly, the vast majority of desirable cultivation locations with abundant spiritual energy had been claimed by the immortal clans in the region. Hence, when it came to a great river god that controlled the fortune of a mighty body of water, that was an important figure that even the prefectural overseer had to do everything in their power to suck up to. The man set down his teacup, then began massaging his temples as he said, The Great River God told me that he had already uncovered the hiding spot of that itinerant cultivator a day before me. He says that even though he can see that I'm unwilling to perform my duty and enforce justice, as the Great River God of the Cold Food River, he must abide by the rules and refrain from interfering with the official matters of Yellow Court Nation for no good reason. He acknowledged that I've made some decent contributions during my time working in the prefectural office, and that if I were to be replaced, there's a chance that my successor could be an incompetent fool who's constantly causing trouble, which he would then have to step in and resolve. Hence, that would be detrimental to his cultivation, and for that reason, he won't report my inaction to the imperial court. Mistress Lu's face paled slightly upon hearing this. Does that mean that he won't assist you in progressing further up the ranks? A wry smile appeared on the man's face as he replied, Not only that, but if I want to keep my current position, I'll have to apprehend that itinerant cultivator tonight. A remorseful look appeared on Mistress Lu's face as she sighed. I shouldn't have taken my frustrations out on you earlier. An indignant look then surfaced in her eyes as she continued, the cold food great river god has maintained a good reputation for the past few centuries, but when it comes to this matter that concerns his personal interests, he's still chosen to selfishly take sides, rather than do the right thing. That man was just a third-generation disciple of the Spirit Charm clan, yet he dared to blatantly lust after a woman at the city god temple. First, he killed a couple outside the city, and after hearing that one of their children managed to escape, he pursued that child without mercy or remorse, killing an entire village of over 30 people in one night. These heinous actions are completely unforgivable. That itinerant cultivator just so happened to run into him, and prior to avenging that village, he made the smart decision to spread word of the perpetrator's crimes across the entire city, and posters denoting his transgressions were even put up at the entrance of your prefectural office. Only after doing all of that did the itinerant cultivator come to my autumn read-in to challenge the perpetrator. The Great River God has informants all throughout the prefectural city, so there's no way he wouldn't have been aware of all of this. In response to Mistress Lu's indignant complaints, the man merely heaved a forlorn sigh. Cultivators pursue the great Tao of heaven and earth, and in their eyes, mortal lives are worth next to nothing. Compared with their pursuit of the great Tao, things like upholding justice and doing the right thing pale into insignificance. Objectively speaking, it's not like the cold food great river god is completely above the law. It's just that a fourth-rank official like me doesn't have the jurisdictive power to hold him to the law. The old governor would be able to do more than I can, but only His Majesty would be able to truly hold the great river god accountable. What if you were a prefectural overseer of the Greatly Empire? Mistress Lu mused in a quiet voice. A stern look appeared in the man's eyes, and he slammed a hand heavily down onto the armrest of his chair as he scolded. Watch your mouth, Lu Zhuhou. No matter how powerful the Greatly Empire is, it was still once a nation of northern savages. If the Greatly Empire were to take over the northern region of the continent, then that would be the day that civilization falls in the north of eastern treasured vile continent. An enraged look appeared on Mistress Lu's face as she countered. If you truly have a spine, then why don't you go against the great river god's wishes and insist on protecting that itinerant cultivator to the end? He may be a great river god, but I'm sure he's not omnipotent. Are you telling me that he can just do whatever he pleases in the northern region of our Yellow Court nation without any consequences? If worst comes to worst, I'll call upon my sect and have them duke it out against the Spirit Charm sect to see who comes out on top. The man was so bewildered by Mistress Lu's outburst that he couldn't help but burst into laughter. How old are you? How could you still be so childish and laughable at your age? Do you think that the Greatly Empire enjoyed a smooth ascent the entire time en route to reaching its current heights? There's so much injustice in this prefecture of ours alone. Think about how many compromises would have to have been made across the vast territory of the Greatly Empire. The Emperor of the Greatly Empire would have undoubtedly been forced to endure and tolerate far more filth and injustice than we could ever imagine. Mistress Lu fell silent upon hearing this. The man took a sip of tea, then leaned against the back of his chair with an exhausted expression, pulling on his own collar as he mused. I am a student of Confucianism, so I must do my best to better myself and abide by the rules. However, at the same time, I'm also an official of Yellow Court Nation, and there are millions of citizens in the territory under my jurisdiction. I have to ensure that they can live peaceful lives and aren't stricken down by poverty. Hence, I can't serve as an official while abiding by the same standards that I enforce upon myself as a person. I have to suck up to those immortal sects and implore them to grant us people and treasures to ward off all types of droughts and natural disasters. I have to present gifts and appease those arrogant mountain and river gods, so that they'll impart some of their fortune in our prefecture. For all mortals, regardless of whether they be impoverished peasants or wealthy merchants, if they're oppressed by immortals, all I can do is offer temporary solutions and console them as much as possible. The man closed his eyes as he continued. If I hadn't gone against my conscience this entire time, I would have resigned from my position or been stripped of it long ago. If that had happened, then as soon as that itinerant cultivator put up the first poster outside the prefectural office, my successor would have immediately apprehended him in order to suck up to the great river god. If someone else were in my position, after that itinerant cultivator dies tonight, there won't even be a tombstone erected for him. Then again, if someone is already dead, what does it matter if they have a tombstone? If they have people offering wine to them during festivals, or if people remember the good deeds that they had done during their lifetime? The man rose to his feet, then made his way over to the window as he continued in a solemn voice. The second year of Yellow Court Nation's Zhuhou period, which was 10 years ago, an earthquake struck at midnight, affecting 3 states including the Praise State, which was the most heavily affected of the 3 states. Countless houses, city walls, and temples collapsed, killing over 60,000 people. For an entire month after that, an aftershock would take place once every few days, causing all of the large rivers in the north, including the Cold Food River, to become extremely turbulent. Close to 100 people perished by drowning in our prefecture alone. During the 4th year of the Zhuhou period, a landslide took place in the Lush state. During the 8th year of the Zhuhou period, a boat on a river in the southeastern Balance state erupted into flames on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival. The fire spread to all of the boats gathered on the river that night, of which there were over 1,000, resulting in over 10,000 people being burned to death. A despairing look appeared on the man's face, and his lips were quivering as he sighed. Were those disasters really just natural disasters? The people don't know the truth, but I do. The man turned to Mistress Lu as he continued. In fact, I can even imagine that prior to his capture and death, that itinerant cultivator will be sure to curse me as a lapdog of the Spirit Charm sect and the Cold Food Great River God, and his resentment for me will exceed his resentment for them. Mistress Lu wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. A placid look gradually returned to the man's face as he mused. I'm certain that after that itinerant cultivator's death, the wealthy clans in the city will immediately begin spreading false rumors, claiming that I went out of my way to find the itinerant cultivator's hiding spot before having him killed, all to appease the Spirit Charm sect. That will most likely be the case, Mistress Lu sighed. The man smiled as he said, I'm not saying this for you to hear, I'm saying this to myself. There was white mist constantly rising up out of the old well in the autumn read-in before dissipating in all directions, but the water level in the well was actually extremely low, and its internal walls were covered in moss. All of a sudden, the water level in the well began to rise rapidly, and once the water had risen to the same level as the opening of the well, a tall and imposing armored man wielding a short halberd stepped out from within. The man had a long feeler growing out of each side of his face, but aside from that, he looked no different from a normal person. The man inspected his surroundings, paying no heed to Lin Shuyi, who was seated in silent meditation over at the pavilion. He then rose up into the air, instantly landing in the courtyard where Mistress Lu and the prefectural overseer were situated before declaring, I've already personally decapitated that itinerant cultivator, prefectural overseer Wei. At the time, there were many bystanders at the scene, and that accursed scoundrel began directing all manners of foul insults at you. He also revealed many embarrassing secrets of yours, and he dared to extend those insults to my master as well. I had originally intended to grant him a swift death, but I was infuriated by his insolence, so I stabbed a few holes into him first before chopping off his head. Once I return to my master, I'll be sure to clear up the situation with him, so rest assured, that scoundrel's insolent words definitely won't impact your relationship with my master. After making this report, the subordinates of the Cold Food Great River God departed without any hesitation, while Mistress Lu looked on with a dazed expression. Given that itinerant cultivator's strong sense of justice, it was only to be expected that he would denounce the prefectural overseer as a lapdog before he was killed. However, it didn't make any sense for him to reveal a bunch of embarrassing secrets about the prefectural overseer in front of the Spirit Charm sect and so many bystanders from the city. The prefectural overseer had met the itinerant cultivator in secret before, so each of them had an idea of what the other person was thinking. It could be said that it was rather strange that the prefectural overseer had suddenly decided to betray the itinerant cultivator, but it was even stranger that the itinerant cultivator would direct so much slander at the prefectural overseer as his final words. It seems like I still underestimated him after all. Having served as an official for so many years, the prefectural overseer was much more familiar with these matters, and he quickly developed a rough idea of what had to have transpired within the Greatly Empire. All mountain and river gods appointed by the imperial court were merely presented to the general public in the form of statues or temples, and even the gods of the 5 mountains were no different. However, on the rest of Eastern treasured vile continent outside of the Great Li Empire, all mountain and river gods, from the great river gods of the Iron Talisman River, the Red Candle Town, and the rushing Tranquil River, to the lowly river guardians such as the one in Dragon Whisker Creek, as long as they could establish strong ties with the local authorities and there weren't any powerful cultivating sects nearby, they would be able to erect official mountain and river palaces, ones that weren't inferior in scale to the palaces of mortal empires. As one of the highest-ranked gods of Yellow Court Nation, the Cold Food Great River God had constructed a lavish palace on a plot of land next to the Cold Food River where there were no cities or towns within a radius of 100 kilometers. The palace took up over 1,000 acres of land, having been constructed over the course of many years, and there was a plaque that read Great Water hanging over its entrance. However, it was proclaimed to the general public that the palace was owned by the founding clan of Yellow Court Nation, the Chu clan, and that the descendants of the Chu clan had constructed the palace after earning an immense amount of wealth. In reality, the true owner of the palace was the Cold Food Great River God. On this night, the palace was brightly lit, and there seemed to be a banquet taking place inside with all manners of wealthy and noble figures in attendance. The walls were lined with eternal flame lamps, which were extremely precious treasures even in cultivating sections. The lamps weren't precious for their intricately crafted covers. Instead, what made them so valuable was the drop of ambergris inside of each lamp. Eternal flame lamps were mostly used in places like imperial tombs, and all that was required to light the substance was a normal candle and a wick that had been dipped in lamp oil made from the fat of deep-sea amber whales. If the ambergris were of sufficiently high quality, then the lamp could burn for a century without going out. Furthermore, its aroma would linger for long periods of time, and that aroma had a soothing effect that was not inferior to that of top-grade sandalwood. The main seat in the palace was occupied by an azure-robed man, who held a white jade cup in his hand. The cup contained a type of golden wine that was both viscous and fragrant, and he was gently swirling the contents of the cup around in circles. There was a round rank insignia embroidered onto the chest of the man's robes, depicting a coiled golden dragon. All of the 20 or so guests present in the hall were cultivators of quite a lofty status, but they still treated the azure-robed man with a great deal of veneration, and the hint of wariness that occasionally flashed through their eyes indicated that their respect for the azure-robed man went beyond the respect held by a guest toward their host. The autumn read-in. Quite some time had already passed since Cui Chan's departure, and under the light of the lamp, Chan Ping'an had finished engraving the first white jade hairpin. He raised his head to look at Li Huai, who was seated across from him with his head resting on the table, and he asked, "Would you like Li Huai or Huayan engraved onto your hairpin? If you want your name on your hairpin just like for Baoping and Shuyi, then it'll be really simple, whereas Huayan carries a bit more meaning." Li Huai's mind was clearly elsewhere, and he smiled as he replied, "Whichever one is fine." Chan Ping'an picked up the black jade hairpin as he mused. "Do you want this one? The color matches the shade cast by a tree." Li Huai nodded in response, then mustered up some courage before asking, "Chan Ping'an, you're not going to get mad at Lin Shuyi and beat him to death, are you? I feel like even though Lin Shuyi has become a cultivator, you'd still be able to easily take care of him with a punch or two. Lin Shuyi has a really stinky personality, he doesn't like to talk much, and he's a bit more cunning than us, but he has a good heart." Chan Ping'an was rather amused to hear this and he scoffed, "What's going on in that head of yours? Why would I fight Lin Shuyi? If Lin Shuyi picks a fight with you, you can agree, but just teach him a lesson and don't go too far," Li Huai said, in a timid manner. "Lin Shuyi comes from a wealthy family, and he's not tough like me. I can take a few hits from Li Baoping and still be fine, but I don't think he'll be as durable." Chan Ping'an didn't know how to explain this matter to Li Huai, so he simply replied, "All right, I'll be sure to keep that in mind." Li Huai was very relieved to hear this, and a smile immediately appeared on his face as he rushed over to his little bookcase to pull out his wooden dolls and that silver ingot. He then returned to his seat and plopped the wooden doll down onto the silver ingot before continuing, "Lin Shuyi told me before that all of the states, prefectures, and major cities follow the teachings of Confucianism when establishing their policies. Cities have city god pavilions, while counties have city god temples. Officials like prefectural overseers and county magistrates oversee the world of the living, while the city gods preside over the world of the dead. maintaining law and order and patrolling the borders to prevent ghosts and spirits from doing anything sinister. The city god temple that we went to was massive, and it's situated in a prefectural city, so why is it still called a temple? Shouldn't it be called a city god pavilion instead? Also, we spent so long exploring the city god temple during the day. Is it possible that we've already run into the city god, but we simply failed to recognize him? Chen Ping'an thought about these questions for a moment, then replied, "You'll have to raise these questions to Cui Dongshan." Li Huai shook his head vigorously in response. "I don't like that guy. He always talks in a strange and mysterious way." Inside a room, a pair of girls, one older than the other, were seated across from each other with an oil lamp between them. One of them was polishing her bamboo flute, while the other had her arms crossed in a staunch manner with a cold look in her eyes. "Xie, you snore at night and it's really loud," Li Baoping declared. "Even when I was sleeping in my own tent really far away from yours, I could still hear you." Xie raised her head with a smile as she replied, "You must have heard someone else. I never snore in my sleep." "How do you know you don't snore in your sleep?" Li Baoping asked as she raised an eyebrow. Xie gently massaged the bamboo flute with her fingers and imitated Li Baoping's eyebrow raise as she replied, "Because I'm a cultivator, someone that people like you revere as gods and immortals." "Oh yeah? Well, do you have a little bookcase?" Li Baoping asked as she raised her chin in a provocative manner. Xie had no response to this. Feeling as if she had just secured a resounding victory over Xie, Li Baoping pulled out the pile of books from her bookcase so that she could do some reading under the light of the lamp. As usual, she picked out her beloved travel journal, which contained all types of stories about strange and exotic places, as well as ghosts and spirits. She quickly became immersed in the stories, furrowing her brows one moment before nodding in enlightenment the next, then displaying an elated expression, only to be dazed and dejected a moment later. Meanwhile, Xie was watching closely as she unconsciously glided a finger back and forth along the side of her own cheek. Lin Shui was seated in the pavilion with his eyes closed, breathing and meditating in silence as he carefully sensed the flow of water between heaven and earth. It was like the process of waves washing away sand, removing the impurities while preserving the precious essence. He was collecting the white mist that was emanating from the well bit by bit before absorbing them into his acupoints. Even though quite a loud commotion had rung out from the well, Lin Shui remained completely unmoved. Thankfully, he wasn't the target of the being that had emerged from the well, so neither of them interrupted one another. The recite atop cloud scripture that had caught Lin Shui's eye on Go Table Mountain was a secret Taoist scripture for cultivating the 5 lightning righteous technique. When it came to cultivation guidance for cultivators of the lower 5 tiers, the scripture only had some very general instructions, but as someone who was particularly proficient in calculation and deduction, Lin Shui was able to make great use of the scripture. It didn't take long before Lin Shui began to feel a swollen sensation from several of the acupoints in his body, but he was still unwilling to stop. They had traveled a very long way to get here, and he had never felt such rich and pure spiritual energy before, so he was unwilling to pass up any of it. An hour passed by, and Lin Shui's face had become very red and flushed. He was like a starving man who had been treated to a massive banquet, and due to his unrestrained feasting, he had overeaten and was absolutely stuffed. All of a sudden, someone tapped Lin Shui on the shoulder, and he inadvertently burped, releasing a stagnant breath in the process. It was as if the breath that he had just released truly had been stagnant in his body for a long time, and it reeked of a nauseating odor. The person who had just tapped Lin Shui on the shoulder hurriedly swept his sleeve through the air to scatter the foul stagnant breath as he scolded. "I don't know whether I should call you brave or stupid. Are you not afraid of stuffing yourself to death?" Lin Shui faltered slightly upon hearing this, then asked with a perplexed expression, "Shouldn't a cultivator strive to absorb as much of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as possible?" In the words of Xie, how is a small cup supposed to be able to hold thousands of liters of wine? Cui Chan countered, "If it really is a case of the more the better, then those old geezers who established teachings would have already devoured all of the spiritual energy in all the worlds. How would there be any left for other cultivators? You have to take things slowly and progress one step at a time, and the amount of spiritual energy you can absorb is dependent on how many acupoints you've developed." A hint of lingering fear welled up in Lin Shui's heart upon hearing this, and he raised a hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Meanwhile, Cui Chan sat down with his legs crossed as he cast his gaze toward the old well, out of which spiritual energy continued to rise up incessantly. However, this ethereal white mist could only be seen by cultivators who had already made decent progress, or by masters of the martial arts. For the average person, even if they were to stick their head into the well, they would only be able to feel that it was slightly cooler than other places. Cui Chan turned to Lin Shui with a smile as he said, "I saved your life, so how about you lend me one of your talismans as compensation? I'm only borrowing it, so I'll return it to you." A hesitant look appeared on Lin Shui's face, and Cui Chan continued, "Rest assured, I'm not going to borrow any of the 4 most precious talismans in your possession. Instead, I only want that gold dust talisman, which is a great talisman, but not among the best ones in your collection." Lin Shui finally nodded in agreement. Thus, Cui Chan snapped his fingers, and a golden talisman slipped out of Lin Shui's chest pocket before drifting into Cui Chan's grasp. Cui Chan lowered his head to inspect the talisman with an appreciative expression. Talisman paper was one of the foundational tools of talismanic clans, and the most ordinary talisman paper in the world was yellow worship paper. Above that was yellow seal paper, which was firmer than yellow worship paper, and it was commonly used by all the Taoist sects in the world. There were also some special examples, such as a type of azure talisman paper that was likened to fine weather after a storm, as well as some vibrant talisman papers of different colors, many of which were used by emperors to inscribe their imperial edicts. These were often awarded to officials during festivals or celebrations, and they were impossible for commoners to purchase, no matter how wealthy they were. Talisman paper was generally used by Taoist sects for talisman creation, and Taoist talismans were considered to be the traditional, fundamental roots of all talismans in the world, revered as the progenitor of all talisman branches. However, talismans didn't necessarily have to be inscribed on talisman paper. Enlightened individuals following the teachings of Taoism and terrestrial gods were capable of inscribing talismans into the air without any need for talisman paper. Furthermore, militarians also had talismans of their own, as did Confucianists, but their talismans were slightly more complex compared with militarian talismans, and generally speaking, a formal script was used for these talismans, but the formal script was also split up into 7 or 8 different types, depending on the calligraphy masters that had created them. In contrast, Buddhists placed more emphasis on hand seals, and there were talismans in Buddhism as well, but they were relatively rare. "What are mystical abilities supposed to be?" Lin Shui asked with a curious expression. Cui Chan carefully stowed the gold dust talisman up his sleeve as he casually replied, "You'll find out once you get to the middle 5 tiers. At that point, you'll be able to manifest heartstrings with your intentions, and the extent of your cultivation base and the height of your Tao foundation will dictate the number of heartstrings you'll have, as well as their thickness. That is what it means to be able to procure items from afar." At the moment, Lin Shui was a cultivator at the pinnacle of the 3rd tier. To be able to reach this level in just a few months was astonishing progress, and this rapid rate of progression could be attributed to Lin Shui's outstanding natural aptitude, as well as that flagon of wine from Aoyang. Some wealthy people like to purchase large snakes from hunters to mix the contents of their gallbladders with wine for incredible medicinal effect. So one could only imagine just how potent a medicinal wine infused with the demon core of an ascension stage great demon would be. Cui Chan rose to his feet with a smile as he said, "Aoyang is a mentor of yours in this early stage of your cultivation journey, and you have to cherish this opportunity. Otherwise, what are you going to do?" Lin Shui asked in a direct and straightforward manner. "I'll be very cross with you," Cui Chan concluded with a smile. He was originally about to say, "I'll kill you," but he decided to change his wording at the last moment. After that swollen sensation in his acupoints gradually faded, Lin Shui closed his eyes again, using his body as a vessel to gather energy in order to construct his bridge to immortality. Meanwhile, Cui Chan leaped out of the pavilion before making his way toward the old well, holding the golden dust talisman that he had borrowed from Lin Shui between 2 of his fingers. "Cui Dongshan, what are you doing?" Lin Shui yelled. Cui Chan stepped onto the edge of the well, then turned to Lin Shui with a playful smile. He then raised the talisman high above his head and gently waved it around. At the same time he stepped back, and his entire body slid into the well as he said internally, "Repel water."